Good afternoon / good evening. Um, Yesterday, after I got home from the long drawn out eviction case in which we were victorious, um, I got home and I discovered this case had aired yesterday, and I thought it sounded interesting. So I was wondering about whether to stream it or not, and I thought, oh well, it's only 2 hours for 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 the day, so we can do that easy, catching up on lunch break and so forth. And then it turns out there was a second session, which was a lot longer. And so today during court, we streamed during the breaks and managed to get through a good bit of it, but we still have a bit left to go. I would save some of it for tomorrow, but it turns out it's going to wrap up tomorrow. And so it'll be a 3 day trial. So certainly unexpected there. And so we are going to finish up yesterday's testimony. Get to skip all the breaks, and we're speeding it up to 1.25 just to make it go faster. And let's see, interesting things today in court. Okay, the defendant is supposed to be the best friend of the decedent, and he claims that she was holding his wallet hostage and told him that he had to shoot her, and if he didn't, then she would take the money in the wallet and find somebody else to do it. Well, I think he said that there's like $300 in the wallet, so good luck with a $300 assassin. Anyway, I don't buy that for a moment. If you're in the middle of a park and your crazy friend is saying, shoot me, or I'm going to use your money to hire somebody to do it instead, what do? You call 911 and say, hey, my friend is having a psychotic break here and is wanting me to shoot her. Can you come and collect her and take her to the psych ward? You don't go, okay, if you want me to, and then you tamper with the crime scene and you take her vehicle to a national park nearby and torch it. Go throw the gun into a pond. No, you don't do that. You call 911, or you say, okay, I'll do it, and you come over and act like you're hugging them and manage to knock them out or something, and then you call 911 while they're out cold. You don't go killing them. So anyway, this is the first police officer on the stand, which we are coming back to, and she responded to a 911 call that some people walking in the park spotted a body under the tree. They weren't sure if she was dead or not. Um, Police didn't know what was going on, so they brought a defibrillator with them just in case it was needed. And they got there and they went, oh, she's cold to the touch. Oh, we've got a bullet wound. We need to get the fire department paramedics here to pronounce her dead and start processing the crime scene. So there she was laying down when she was shot, and apparently the gun would have had to been held a particular way, and it would have been kind of an awkward shot at that distance, shooting while laying down on the ground, and having to hold the gun at a certain angle and so forth at a certain distance. So I'm not buying it. If he hadn't told that bit about the wallet, I might believe it, because there are some cases where you do have somebody who begs somebody to put them out of their misery, but it's usually in extreme circumstances, like somebody who is dying of cancer and a long, lingering, painful death. There was a case down in Texas years ago where there were two hikers and they were going on an afternoon hike and they only took a bottle of water each with them. And they went down the trail and they got horribly lost. And they couldn't find their way back to the trail. And so they were down there in this ravine for days. And they had no food and no water. And they were resorting to what people frequently do under circumstances when they don't have water is they recycle. And so that creates a condition called salt intoxication, where um, the more times it cycles through the increased amount of salt that it contains, and it starts to mess with your mind and so forth. And so one of the two friends was having horrible pain from all the muscle cramps and so forth, and the extreme thirst and so forth. And so he begged his friend to put him out of his misery because, they're both going to die anyway. So, please just end it for me now because I can't take it any longer. And so the friend did. And he buried him under a big pile of rocks. And not too long after that, the Rangers came looking because they had found the vehicle, or somebody had reported it as abandoned. And so they went looking and they managed to find the guy. And he told them, yeah, I put my friend out of his misery, and he's over there and under the pile of rocks. And you don't try covering up. You don't go torching things. You don't do things like that. You don't cover up if it's you're assisting somebody in their wish to die. And so the fellow ended up being arrested, went on trial, and he was convicted on some charges. I can't remember exactly what, but he did his time and he got out. And this author wrote this book on the case. And they said, if you happen to run into him, don't give him a hard time. He's done his time. He feels bad about it. Under other circumstances, this would never have happened. And, I've known people who are dying of cancer, and loved ones do sometimes have these thoughts about, yeah, I could do that and help them. And most of them don't. A few of them do. But this was not the case with Tori, and her friend Austin Ford killed her. So let's roll the video now. So here we go.
Now, did you conduct any of the ballistics testing or analysis of the two shell casings?
I performed the DNA swabs of the casings.
I got it wrong. This is the witness after the police officer. This is a crime scene analyst. So here we go.
And the fingerprinting of the casings before they got turned over to Specialist Jimenez, but I did not do the ballistics testing myself.
Did you get any results from the fingerprint testing or swabs of the shell casings that you found?
The DNA swabs are not tested within Gwinnett County Police Department. If they were going to be tested, then a detective would send them off to the GBI for testing. I don't know the results of those tests. The fingerprinting did not yield any results.
And when you say they, I guess, didn't yield any results, did you find any fingerprints on the shell casing?
I did not.
To show you what's marked as State's Exhibits 8 through 19. That's a series of photographs starting with State's Exhibit number 8. Could you describe what they are?
Yes. State's Exhibit number 8 is a photograph depicting one of the fired cartridge casings that contains an evidence marker, which I placed, which is evidence marker number 1. State's Exhibit number 9 is an up-close picture of State's Exhibit number 8, which contains one of the fire cartridge casings that's marked with evidence marker number 1. Other of the 2 fire cartridge casings, which is marked with evidence marker number 2. State's Exhibit 11 is a photograph of the body of the victim standing from the angle of her right foot. It shows her entire body and also the ground surrounding that area. State's Exhibit 12 is another angle of the victim's body, which is kind of standing at the end of both of her feet, looking upwards towards her head. State's Exhibit 13 is a photograph showing the victim's right hand. It also depicts her hair and some biological fluids on the ground near her head. State's Exhibit 14 still shows the victim's right hand, but it also shows a image of more of her hair, the blood on the ground near her head, and then more of her head in that picture. State's Exhibit 15 is more of an up-close 90-degree shot of the upper torso and head of the victim, and it also depicts a portion of her hair as well. State's Exhibit 16 is a picture of the ground that was beneath the victim after the medical examiner personnel had moved her. It also shows the blood that was left on the ground after she had been moved. State's Exhibit 17 is a wider shot of the crime scene prior to the victim being moved. The evidence markers have been placed to show the location of the fire cartridge casings at this point in time, and the picture also shows the screens that we use for privacy purposes. State's Exhibit 18 shows the overall crime scene prior to the evidence markers being laid. You can still note the location of the fire cartridge casings by small pieces of paper that were placed prior to my arrival. It also contains the body of the victim as well. State's Exhibit 19 is another image that shows the overall layout of the scene, including evidence markers marking the fired cartridge casings. And this is from the point of view of beyond the victim's feet.
Are each one of those a true and accurate pictures of what you described?
Yes, they are.
Do any of them appear to have been altered in any way?
No, they do not.
You want to stay with tender States Exhibits 8 through 19?
States 8 through 19 are then admitted without objection.
I'm going to.
Okay.
So you can point out for the jury as I publish these. There will be no audio with these, Your Honor. Start with State's Exhibit number 8. State's Exhibit number 8. I realize you described it, but can you just point out for the jury what is significant and what State's Exhibit number 8 contains?
You're gonna have to keep your voice up if you step away from the microphone. That's fine.
So this right here would be the fire cartridge casing that evidence marker number 1 is labeling. This white piece of paper was laid prior to my arrival by first responding officers just for ease of locating this item, but I placed the evidence marker in order to mark it for the photographs. Picture of the previous image, which shows you more clearly the fire cartridge casing that evidence marker number 1 is labeling.
Now, as far as you know, is this shell casing where it was found and as it was found?
As far as I know, yes, it has not been moved.
Is it? I guess is it sitting on top of? Can I ask this question? Does it look like it's been stepped on?
No, it appears to be sitting on the surface of the ground.
So if it had been stepped on or some pressure were applied to it, what could have happened to it?
You would notice that specifically the hollow portion right here would maybe be filled with dirt or would be sunken into the ground further.
This is State's Exhibit 10.
This is the second of the 2 fire cartridge casings, which I have labeled with evidence marker number 2. We also had a piece of white notebook paper used prior to my arrival.
And does the shell casing in State's Exhibit number 10 appear to have been stepped on?
No, it does not.
And how can you tell that?
The photo portion right here does not appear to have any dirt in it. It appears to be sitting on the sticks.
This is State's Exhibit 11.
So this image is depicting the body of the victim, as I described before, kind of off from her right foot. It shows her in the position that she was in when I arrived on scene. To my knowledge, she hasn't been manipulated or moved at all at this point in time.
State's Exhibit 12.
This is more of an overall shot of the body of the victim where you can see more on top of her body standing north.
State's Exhibit 13.
This image is depicting the right hand of the victim. It's also showing the hair of the victim in this direction, and it also shows blood that's present in the head.
State's Exhibit 15.
It is showing more of a 90-degree shot of the victim from torso to the top of her head. It does show the blood flow from her nose and from her eyes towards the top portion of her head and off to the side. You can also see what appears to be a bone as well.
State's Exhibit 16.
This is the ground. You can see the right hand of the victim here, but this is after medical examiner staff has moved her, and this is the ground beneath where she was laying at the time. This area here is where the approximate location of her head, so it's showing the blood that was left behind after she had been moved.
State's Exhibit 17.
This is more of an overall shot of the scene prior to her being moved. As you can see, the evidence markers are here labeling those fire cartridge casings that we saw in the previous images. And then we have the privacy screens that we use in order to shield it from the eye of the public.
Because about what time of the day was it at this point?
I don't know the exact time of this photograph, but it was probably close to 8 in the morning.
So had the sun come up?
Yes.
And were there, I guess, people coming into the park to do park activities?
Yes.
State's Exhibit 28.
This is
I'm
a
sorry,
similar.
we don't have a 28 yet.
I'm sorry, 18. 28 was my own designation.
This is a similar photograph, but prior to the evidence markers that I laid being placed, you can still see the white notebook paper indicating the approximate location of the fire cartridge casings. But this is just a different table showing the body of the victim.
And does it show the condition of the ground where in the area where she was found?
Yes, it appears as though the ground is kind of damp. Maybe it had rained the night before, and it's not very grassy here. You can see there's a large tree, so there's not a lot of grass right in this area, and the ground is very compact.
Were there a lot of footprints present?
There were not.
And now as this photograph was taken after officers had been on the scene, marked shell casings, and erected small barricades, were even officers' footprints, were those present?
No, and at this point in time, I had also walked through the scene, and my own footprints were also not present.
And State's Exhibit 19.
Similar picture here showing the body of the victim from her feet area, but you can see the evidence markers that have been placed around her.
And again, are there any footprints in this photograph?
There are not.
Thank you. You also mentioned scene videos.
Yes.
Did you take videos of this crime scene?
Yes, I did.
To show you what's marked as State's Exhibit 20. You recognize this?
Yes.
What is it?
This is a USB containing the video footage that I obtained from the crime scene.
How many videos are contained on that thumb drive?
I believe there's 5.
And did you watch each and every one of them?
Yes.
Depiction of the video you took on the scene in Yellow River Park on July 28th, 2021.
Yes.
Your Honor, the state would tender State's Exhibit 20 as the thumb drive, and Exhibits 20A through E being the 5 videos that CSI Hamill recorded on the day of on the crime scene.
All right, States 20 is admitted.
Are the videos narrated, or are they simply just that videos?
There's no audio on the videos.
I'm going to publish at this time, and I will start with Exhibit 20A. If you could just tell the jury what we're looking at.
So this is a little bit further away from the actual scene, kind of showing how the scene appears as we walk towards the scene. You can tell that we're outside of the main barrier of crime scene tape at this point.
And at the beginning of the video, and I'm pausing it at the 2-second mark, are you able to see kind of how large the area of the park is around where Tori was found?
Yes, so this would be this area here, and extending off in that direction would be the grassy field that I referred to early on. And then the immediate area where she was located is kind of contained right here in this crime scene tape. There's also, you can see wooded areas along this way, and this direction would be towards the parking lot area.
And was this the area that was searched by the line of police recruits that you mentioned?
Yes, it was.
And again, was anything found as a result of those searches?
No.
Now publishing Exhibit 20B. Again, if you could just describe for the jury what we're looking at.
So this is walking up towards the scene as it was found. You can tell that I've laid the evidence markers down to mark the fired cartridge casings at this point. It shows the distance between the body of the victim and the evidence markers labeling the fired cartridge casings.
Pause it here in about 4 seconds. Whoa. Where it's clear. You mentioned it shows the distance between the body and the cartridge casings.
Correct.
Did you measure that distance?
I didn't personally measure the distance. We had another specialist measure the distance between the casings.
How familiar are you with the operation of semi-automatic firearms and the ejection of cartridge casings?
I have a basic understanding of how semi-automatic firearms work.
Does a semi-automatic firearm eject a cartridge casing when it's fired?
It does.
What happens to, or what can happen to a shell casing after it is ejected from a semi-automatic firearm?
Shell casings can be, typically with a right-handed firearm, shell casings will be ejected out the right side of the gun. They can go any number of direction, any number of ways, depending on the type of gun, the mechanisms of the individual shooter. There's really no consistency as to where they will go or how they will land. They can bounce or roll or do any number of things depending on the weather, the shooter, any number of factors that vary person to person.
Is that why you personally did not measure the distance between, or where the distance is relating to these shell casings?
In my training and experience, the distance between the shell casings and any other items of evidence isn't something that we typically would measure because we don't consider it pertinent information to have regarding a crime scene. But I didn't personally measure these because I knew that digital imaging would be taken, which could later provide the measurements if needed.
Just a quick note, while she's discussing shell casings and where they land and so forth, Charles Vallow was shot by well, we believe that it was by Alex Cox, Lori Daybell's brother, because he said that he did, and we have always believed that that's true, but we don't really know. Anyway, there was some question about where the casings ended up, and so my kitty's saying hi. um, this could explain why some people were questioning the location. I would need to delve into the issue on the the casings in the Charles Fallow case. So here we go. Let's start back up.
Now going to publish video exhibit 20C.
So this is showing an up close shot of the fire cartridge casing labeled with evidence marker number 1. And then we're moving on to the fire cartridge casing labeled with evidence marker number 2.
State's exhibit 20D.
And this is showing just video documentation of the body of the victim prior to her being moved or manipulated in any way. And this is showing the defect in the side of her head.
And when you say defect, what do you mean?
Typically, we use the word defect to describe a hole that's made as a result from a gunshot wound.
And is that what it appeared to be to you?
Yes.
State's exhibit 20E.
This is showing the body of the victim from the other side of her, also showing the other side of her head as well.
I'm going to show you Florida State's exhibit 21. Do you recognize State's exhibit 21?
Yes, I do.
How do you recognize State's exhibit 21?
These are the fire cartridge casings that I collected from the crime scene.
And how do you know that these are the fire cartridge casings that you collected from this crime scene?
They contain the original packaging, which I taped and initialed, each individually and also both together.
And are they in the same or substantially the same condition as when you collected them and packaged them?
Other than the fact that they've been removed from their packaging, yes.
Your Honor, State would tender State's exhibit 21.
No objection, Judge. Thank you. All right, 21 is admitted without objection.
That's all the questions I have for Investigator Hamel this time.
And if you'll put any admitted exhibits at the front so that both sides can access them. All right, Mr. Lawrence Lewis, cross-examination.
Thank you. Ms. Hamill, the prosecutor called the investigator. How should I refer to the investigator? Ms. Hamill?
Either is fine.
Is that your title, investigator?
Specialist investigator.
Okay, fantastic. Let me start here. You testified that you didn't leave any discernible footprints on the ground when you walked around the scene. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
Okay, so when I hear you say that, I think that the ground was hard. Is that a fair characterization? The ground was hard such that you couldn't leave any footprints?
It seemed to be fairly compact, yes.
Okay, and is it fair to say that fired cartridge casings can bounce on hard ground. Is that fair to say?
Yes,
All right. And is that why you indicate that the distance of the shell casings is not pertinent? Is that why you said that?
that can be a portion of the reason, but it's not the reason in its entirety.
Okay, well, give me the reason in its entirety, why the distance of the shell casings is not pertinent.
The amount of variables that can come into play when measuring the location of a shell casing is too high to scientifically replicate and create a constant for. They could be moved because of the ground, the wind, if it had been rained on, the physics of the shooter, him or herself, whoever it may be, how strong they're holding the firearm can affect the direction of the casings. So there's just too many variables to create a scientific constant in order to have that be something that we can rely on as scientific evidence.
And when you say that, in my mind, even if you can try to replicate it, one firearm, 6 of the same type of shell casings, a dummy hand firing it, the shell casings are going to go all over. They're never going to land in the same spot. Is that fair to say?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so where the shell casings land does not give you any indication of where the gun was when the fired cartridge casings were ejected from the gun. Is that fair to say?
Correct.
Okay, and that's why you say we don't need to be taking all these measurements because it's not pertinent. We really just don't know where the gun was when these rounds were ejected. Is that fair to say?
That's correct.
Okay. The 2 fired cartridge casings were recovered. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
And they appear to be the same brand. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Did you put black powder on each of the separate fired cartridge casings in order to try to get fingerprints?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And in doing that, you were unable to pull any fingerprints of value. Is that fair to say?
That's correct.
We have the pictures of sort of where the rounds are. The round that's closest to the body is about how far away from the body?
If I can refer.
Sure.
The round that was closer to the body was marked with evidence marker number 2, and it was approximately 9 feet away from the head of the victim.
9 feet away from the head. And the other round, mark number 1?
Yeah, that was approximately 14 feet away from the head of the victim.
14 feet. And do we know how far number 1 and number 2 were from each other?
I don't personally have that measurement. I believe another specialist would have that.
All right, that's fine. The 2 shell casings that were recovered, the brand, do you have that in your report?
I do.
What's the brand?
The shell casings that were recovered from the scene were Aguila brand.
Spell that for me.
Yes, Aguila.
And they were 9mm rounds?
That's correct.
I'm going to show you what's been marked Stacy exhibit number 5. I don't know if I should suggest that they're bullets or shell casings, but they appear to be ammunition. That appears to be ammunition in Stacy exhibit number 5. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Are those rounds labeled the same thing? Do they appear to be the same brand?
As each other or as the
Yeah,
case?
As each other.
There are 2 different types of brands in this picture.
What are the 2 different types?
The first one is RP Luger 9mm. The second brand is Aguila 9mm.
How many of the first type are there? Well, first of all, how many rounds are there?
There are 10 rounds.
10 rounds. How many of the first type of rounds?
There are 6 of the first type.
So I assume then that 4 are the Aguila 9mm. Is that right?
That's correct.
And that appears, those 4 rounds appear to be the same type of rounds as the shell casings that you recovered. Is that right?
They do.
Thank you very much. No further questions. Thank you, Judge.
But
How can you identify, I guess, the brand of a shell casing or live round?
The head stamp, which is the flat portion at the back of the ammo or of the casing, will have a brand and typically also a number, which will indicate the millimeter or the caliber of ammunition.
Is this common amongst the manufacturers of ammunition?
Yes.
Do you know anything about the Aguila brand of ammunition?
I don't.
Is it fair to say that these were not the only Aguila rounds in existence?
Yes.
Is it fair to say that they probably meant that there were probably a large number of them manufactured?
Yes.
response.
I'll withdraw the question.
Jury will disregard that question.
I guess, how many different brands of ammunition have you seen in your career as a crime scene investigator?
More than I could probably number.
Do you often see, I guess, the same brands or multiple brands? Let me hold on that question. Have you seen the same brand in more than one scene?
Yes.
No further questions.
Cross-examination. No, thank you. All right, you can step down. Just take your personal belongings, please. I'll ask Bailiff Wooten to move the exhibits to the front of the bench. And please call your next witness. I think she's trying to get your attention, one of the bailiffs. She needs to go. All right, let me just notify your advocate to have your witness wait outside. Let's take a 10-minute restroom break, please. I will need all the jurors to step out, please. Leave your notepads and pens. Remember your precautionary instructions. Minutes or less recess as soon as the jury is ready. So if counsel needs a restroom break, take it now. Mr. Ford is with the deputies.
Okay, we've got a short break here. This judge seems to be really efficient. And let's see. Here we go. Looks like it was a 7-minute break. This trial is going to be wrapping up tomorrow. So it's a short and sweet case.
All right, swear in your witness, please.
Raise your right hand, please. You swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give in this matter now pending before the court to be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
Please introduce yourself to the jury. Put your hand down now. Please introduce yourself to the jury.
My name is Brittany Barrington. I am a crime scene supervisor with the Gwinnett County Police Department's Crime Scene Investigations Unit.
What education training do you have that allows you to do that job?
Yes, I have a bachelor's degree in social and criminal justice. I have a master's in education. I am also post-certified as a crime scene investigator with the state of Georgia. I also have various certificates through the forensic community as well.
Did you participate in the investigation of a homicide or death in Yellow River Park on July 28th of 2021?
Yes.
What was your role in that investigation?
As a supervisor, I am at the scene to make sure everything is flowing okay, everything is getting done how it needs to get done. We have a lead crime scene specialist that is their scene that they work. I am responsible for what actions they are doing and also a go-between between us and detectives.
What's a Pharaoh?
So a Pharaoh is a computer program that does a live 3D scan of any type of environment that we need to document what's going on at the scene. So it is a scanner that scans wherever we are, indoors, outdoors, and it's for investigative purposes. It helps us with documentation, capturing what maybe photography wouldn't capture, just an overall sense of how the scene is in like a real version, like real, you're there street version.
Can you spell that for us?
It's just F-A-R-O.
And are you trained and certified in how to use the Pharaoh?
Yes, I was certified, trained and certified in February of 2020.
And did you utilize it in Yellow River Park in July of 2021?
Yes, I did.
Were you able to generate measurements at the request of the DA's office
Yes, I was.
to show you what's marked as State's Exhibits 22 and 23? What are State's Exhibits 22 and 23?
22 and 23 are still photos of the Pharaoh scan of a particular scan that has measurements from two particular points to one singular point. It's a point to point.
And are those true and accurate stills of the ones that you generated?
Yes.
Has anything been added to them, taken away from them?
No.
You're going to stay with tender States Exhibits 22 and 23, which are still photographs of Pharaoh scans.
All right, 22 and 23 are admitted without objection.
Offhand, do you know what's Pharaoh mean? Acronym?
It's just the business name.
1 second, so I can publish these to the jury. Publishing States Exhibit 22. Can you describe what we're looking at in States Exhibit 22?
Yes. So what you're viewing is one of the scans that was completed on scene. So in order to accurately depict what the scene looks like using Pharaoh, there's different scan points that you need to get like a 360 view, make sure that everything is captured that's needed. This is one of those scan locations. And what you're looking at is evidence marker 1 and evidence marker 2 and the decedent. And you're looking also at the measurements, the point to point from evidence marker 1 to the center of the decedent's forehead, and evidence marker 2 also at the same point of the center of the forehead.
Nomination.
Some good afternoon. Let me ask this first question. When was that request made by the district attorney's office for you to use the Pharaoh system?
The specific to get the measurements part, or that was about 2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago. And what's after the measurements part?
What do you mean?
You indicated to get the measurements part. Is there a different process with Pharaoh after the measurements part?
No.
Okay, so 2 weeks ago, a request was made for you to get the distance between where the blood pool is, where the decedent's head is, and where the rounds are. Is that right?
The only request that I was given was for the 2 casings to the head.
2 casings to the head. You weren't given the request for the distance of the casings from one another. Is that right?
That's right.
And how often do you use the Pharaoh system in a homicide case?
For Pharaoh, we use it for every homicide case.
Every homicide case. Does that mean that you produce those type of photos with the measurements for every case, or is that something that information is taken but is not produced unless specifically requested?
That's correct. We actually have a system that is accessible that you can do an actual live version of what measurements you specifically want. We provide that to whoever wants that so they can create their own measurements. But if they specifically request certain measurements, then we can go and do those measurements, do a print screen, and print it out for whoever's requesting it.
Got it. Thank you very much, Ms. Barrington. Thank you, Judge.
Any redirect?
No, Your Honor.
All right, thank you so much. You may step down.
Thank you.
Call your next witness, please.
10 minutes.
Good afternoon. If you watch your step coming up, and if you will be seated comfortably in the chair and position yourself directly in front of the microphone for me, please.
Thank you.
Raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give in this matter now pending before the court shall be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Please introduce yourself to the jury.
My name is Kia Jimenez, and I'm a crime scene investigator with Gwinnett County Police Department.
And what training and education do you have that allows you to do this job?
I have a Bachelor's of Arts and a Bachelor's of Science from the University of Georgia. I also have completed a 5-month on-the-job field training program that allows me to do all of the specifics related to crime scene. In addition to that, I do hold post certification through the state of Georgia, non-sworn, as a crime scene technician.
Do you have special training or knowledge as it relates to firearms?
I do. In addition to the state mandated post training, we are given opportunities to train in other specializations. And I have taken shooting reconstruction courses. I apologize. Along with advanced shooting reconstruction, I am also trained through the ATF, the Department of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, to do triage and analysis of casings to do presumptive matches between casings that are fired from firearms.
Have you ever been admitted as an expert in the state of Georgia as it relates to firearms and or the triage of shell casings or identification of shell casings?
Yes, I have.
How many times?
At least twice.
Your Honor, the state would tender CSI Jimenez.
Yes, all right, members of the jury, sometimes when objections are made, the nature of it requires me to consider it outside your presence. So I'll ask you to leave your notepads and pens in your chair and please step out with the bailiff. Yes, let me have the witness step off the witness stand, please. If you'll just wait outside. All right, Mr. Lawrence Lewis, I will hear from you on the state's motion to have her tendered as an expert in, repeat that for me again? Firearms and shell casing identification? Well, tell me now specifically how you're seeking to tender her.
Shell casing, triage, and identification.
Nothing with firearms.
Well, firearms and triage. I thought you were asking to clear up the last part. Firearms and shell casing, triage, and identification.
Okay, I'm not sure what that means.
I'm not sure what it means either, Judge. So that's what I mean. Listen, if she's being presented as an expert to say shell casings come out of semi-automatic weapons, I don't have any objection to that. Is she going to identify that these shell casings were fired? I don't have any objection to that because there's a firing pin mark on the faceplate, the whatever it's called, I forget, the head stamp. So I'm not quite sure what she's going to testify to, but I'll couch it in this terms. 2 witnesses ago, the person with the master's degree said that this is of shell casings is not pertinent.
Okay. Do you want to proffer her outside the presence of the jury? First of all, I don't know what it means to be an expert in shell casing, triage, and identification. So I'm going to need, okay, through the witness. So let's bring the witness back in. Let me have Mr. Norris Lewis for the state clarify for the court more clearly how he seeks to tender the witness as an expert. And I'll let you, Mr. Lawrence Lewis, cross-examine her outside the presence of the jury. And then hopefully I will be prepared to rule.
That's fine.
All right, and before we resume the question, Christine, can you back up for me to the beginning? And let me just review.
To the beginning of the question, yeah.
About her background. Let me go back to that. Okay, keep going. Okay, a little bit more. She remains under oath. Let me have you clarify for the court, please, through questioning of how you seek to tender her as an expert, Mr. Norris Lewis.
You mentioned a firearms, a course that you took in showcasing triage and identification given by ATF. What did they teach you in that class?
So it was 3 separate courses. The primary course was a triage course, which basically teaches you to identify class characteristics or overall characteristics of a head stamp of a casing so that you can group them into groups that can then be examined by someone who is higher trained to determine whether or not those are likely to have been fired from the same weapon. After that, there's an acquisitions course, which is the process of entering those casings onto the NIBIN or the IBIS system. After that, there's a correlations course. That course is what I'm trained in all the others, but that one is the one that actually gives me the ability to compare casings. So that course, you are basically taught to take casings and they are run through the NIBIN system. You receive a, top however many options of casings that could be potential matches based on those class characteristics that were done way before. But then we actually have to, as correlators, go in and compare the individual striations that are left onto the head stamp by the firearm when the actual casing is ejected from the gun. And we're comparing those and saying, like, are these actually going to be leads? Are they going to be related? Now, after that, they get sent to a firearm examiner for confirmation, but we are not, that's done by the GBI. The ATF gives us the ability to make those leads without any oversight because of the training we've had.
So based on your training and your knowledge, are you able to compare 2 rounds that have been fired from a weapon and make at least a preliminary determination on whether or not they were fired from the same weapon?
Yes. A confirmation does have to occur after, but the preliminary I can't do.
And are there characteristics that you observe on those fired shell casings that determine whether or not you make that determination that you're able to make?
Yes, there are characteristics on the actual shell casing that allow you to make that comparison.
And also, so I can be complete with this. Are you familiar with semi-automatic handguns?
Yes.
How have you come to be familiar with semi-automatic handguns?
When we began our, firearms or our NIBIN unit, I was tasked with being the original person to assist in creating the system of test firing weapons and then entering those into an older system that we have. But through that, I was, consistently, weekly getting firearms from our evidence unit, having to take them to our firing range to be test fired, taking those casings and then entering them into our system. So, I handled, in my career, several hundreds, if not thousands of firearms.
Are you familiar with the 6-hour P365?
Yes, I actually had a case earlier this year with a P365.
Have you had occasion to test fire a 6-hour P365?
I believe so. I don't have the exact numbers, but actually, yes, that firearm was test fired in January this year.
Do you have any idea how many times it was test fired by you?
I do not. We typically do 2 test fires, but I don't have the numbers in front of me, so I can't say exactly.
Are you familiar with the type of fire, the type of firing pin from 6-hour P365 typically leaves on a shell casing?
Typically, yes.
I don't have any other questions at this time, Your Honor.
Cross-examination by Lawrence Lewis.
Again, I didn't want to interrupt Mr. Lewis. If preliminarily, what she's going to say is the same firearm fired both shell casings, I'll stipulate to that. But I think it's a little bit more than that as I sat and listened, and I think that she may be testifying as an expert as to this specific weapon being the likely weapon that fired both of the shell casings. As it relates to the same firearm firing both shell casings, I'll stipulate to that. But it seems like she has some more, and I don't know that she needs to qualify as an expert to triage, but I don't have any objection.
So let me make sure I understand your argument. So are you withdrawing your objection to her being tendered as an expert as presented by the state?
I don't even know if it came out as an objection. I asked to take up something outside the presence of the jury because I didn't even understand I understand triage in a landing zone, military type situation. I didn't understand what she was testifying to. I don't have any objection in terms of what has been proffered, her being an expert to testify as to what has been proffered she's going to testify to. I don't have any objection.
All right, but what I don't want to do is bring the jury in and then she starts testifying to something that's not exactly what you think. So please proffer her so we can clarify that on any issue that you might object to?
I don't see me objecting to any issue that sounds like one gun fired both of these shell casings. I don't see me objecting to anything involving her expert opinion as to the weapon that fired these shell casings being this P blah, blah, blah gun. Anything else is going to have to come in my mind after this moment. But at this moment, I don't foresee me asking her any questions that would require me to challenge her expertise as the prosecutor has offered it to the court to this point. Thank you, Judge.
All right, I'll bring the jury in, and I will have her so tendered as an expert as requested by the state. Both sides ready?
Yes, thank you.
Yes, Your
All right, let's bring the jury in. So I'll need you to make your motion again when the jury comes in from the state. And I'll rule on it at that time, please.
We had some question on whether or not she could testify, or the judge assumed that was the case, and turns out the defense counsel was confused on a couple of points, but they've got it all straightened out so she can testify. She's only testified as an expert in 2 trials before, so the judge assumed that that's why he was concerned. And the jury's coming back in now they've resolved the issue.
All right, I'll have the state resume its examination, please.
Thank you.
I keep having trouble with the law and crime video buffering.
Tender, CSI Jimenez is an expert in firearms and in shell casing, triage, and identification.
No objection.
All right, hearing no objection, she will be so tendered.
Are you familiar with the operation of a semi-automatic handgun?
I am.
I guess, have you fired semi-automatic handguns before?
I have.
You fired a lot of semi-automatic handguns.
I have.
I have. I'll show you what's marked as State Exhibit number 30. I will fill in the numbers. What is State Exhibit 30?
This is a USB containing videos showing the mechanical operation of a firearm when it is fired and the different components of a firearm.
Have you viewed those videos?
I have.
Would they assist you in explaining to the jury the complete function of a semi-automatic handgun?
They would provide a visual representation.
Your Honor, I would tender State's Exhibit 30 and the videos A, B, and C for demonstrative purposes.
I don't have any objection, Judge.
All right, is it narrated by this witness?
Videos do contain audio, but the audio will not be published to the jury, and I will allow CSI Jimenez to narrate the videos.
All right, so any exception to that, Mr. Lawrence?
Thank you, Judge.
All right, so that the record is clear, only the video portions of States 30, A, B, and C are being admitted for the record. No audio is admitted by the court.
There's a pointer, right? State's Exhibit 30A.
Okay, so here we are just going to be going over some of the principal components of a firearm. So this is a semi-automatic handgun. The portion that's racked back to actually load the round into the chamber is called the slide. That's at the top. All right. the grip module is just a portion of the actual handle that you're going to be using. This back portion is the tang. That's just going to be a rest against the, I guess, webbing area of your hand. And of course, everyone knows the trigger. The plastic piece around is the trigger guard to prevent any accidental misfires. The hammer, this is going to be the portion of the firearm that actually comes back when the trigger is pulled that will actually push the firing pin in. Now you have a rear sight and a front sight so that you can actually see what you're looking at when you're firing the weapon. A slide catch to keep that slide from moving and operating correctly. The grip panel is just the same portion of the handle that actually gives you some traction on it. The muzzle is where the projectile is going to eject. The accessory rail is for any lights or accessories that you want to add to your firearm. The front strap is just additional gripping so that you can have a good hold on the firearm. And then the magazine goes into the grip, and that's where the intact cartridges or bullets actually go. The magazine release ejects that from the firearm itself so you can load it. Then you have your take down lever up top. This is the magazine actually ejecting. And this is the inside view of that same firearm, showing the firing pin that I mentioned earlier that's controlled by the hammer, the barrel, which is where the actual bullet travels, the recoil guide rod that just actually makes the slide move back and forth, and the recoil spring is the spring around it. All right, so the magazine gets placed into the firearm here. So you can see the magazine body as well as the opening at the top that holds the intact cartridge. And that's just the intact cartridges as viewed from a side of the magazine. The spring at the base and the follower, those actually push the intact cartridges up towards the barrel of the gun.
That's exhibit 30B.
Now, this video is going to show basically what I just narrated, but that cycle of the projectile actually being fired. So the intact cartridges in the magazine are being pushed up by the spring lever, and then they are going to be loaded into the barrel of the gun after each round is ejected. So you have a new round. Actually, let's let this one finish. This cartridge that at the very top that has been fired is going to eject out of the side port. A new one is going to go up into the barrel, and then as you pull the trigger, the hammer is going to make the firing pin actually hit the breech or the center fire cup of the cartridge, and that's what's going to ignite the gunpowder inside of the intact cartridge, which will propel the bullet down the barrel. After that happens, we saw midway through the video that the casing that the bullet is housed within is ejected out of the ejector port located on the side of the firearm. And then the cycle starts over again.
Stage 30C.
And here we just have a better view of the firing process. So the magazine, you have a chamber or a round in the chamber, your hammer back at the back, your firing pin is the cylindrical object with the spring around it, the cartridge, and then you have the barrel that it's going to be coming through. So this gray material, that is your gunpowder. You have the case, which is the gold or yellowish casing around the gunpowder, and then the bullet itself. So when the trigger is pulled, the firing pin is going to come back, and then it will hit the primer, which ignites the gunpowder, propels the projectile down the barrel. As we see here, you get an explosion of gases because that is a very small environment with a lot of combustible materials. So you have this gunpowder that's going to come out of the firearm at the barrel site and also out of the ejector port when the casing is ejected.
And does, and I paused it at the 43-second mark. What we see is what looks like sparks and particulate smoke coming out of the muzzle. Does that travel a certain distance and after it leaves the muzzle?
So it depends on conditions, of course, but typically if you have anything outside of like a 6 to 10 foot radius, you're not going to get a lot of visible markings. But really when you get like powder deposition on a surface, it has to be relatively close range.
Are you familiar with the Sig Sauer B365?
Yes,
Is it a semi-automatic hammer?
it is.
Does it operate in that fashion?
It does.
We'll show you what's marked as State's Exhibit 31. What is State's Exhibit 31?
This appears to be a replica of a semi-automatic handgun. It's about the same size as a P365. Now, this appears to be for a Glock 43, but they are of similar size, and their operation would be the same as this firearm.
And would that help you explain your expert testimony to a jury?
Yes, in relation to, the size of the firearm, or the size of a P365.
I would tender State's Exhibit 31 for demonstrative purposes.
All right, State's 31 is admitted without objection.
Now, this replica weapon has what appears to be an ejection port on the right side. Is that typical of firearms?
It is pretty typical. You can have firearms that are left side ejecting, but usually it's going to be the right.
I guess are more firearms manufactured, as far as you know, they're right side ejecting versus left side ejecting?
Yes, that is correct. There are more that are right side ejecting.
A couple more, a lot?
A lot more.
So you test fired a number of firearms.
Yes, yes.
About how many firearm test fires do you think you've conducted?
Personally, I mean, probably about 100 myself, but I've been present for thousands easily.
And obviously each semi-automatic firearm ejects a cartridge casing?
They should, yes.
Well,
Unless there's a malfunction, yes.
Now, describe what a malfunction means in the firing process of a semi-automatic.
So you can have a malfunction where the barrel itself or where the slide doesn't completely rack back, and you might get, a stovepipe. Like, say if you were to grab the slide while it's actively being fired, you could have the casing get stuck into the barrel so it doesn't fully eject. You may also just have some that don't eject because of the way that you handled it. But most of the time they should eject properly. Damage can contribute to a malfunction.
And is there a way to get that shell casing out if there is a malfunction?
Oftentimes, yes.
But sometimes no?
But sometimes no. Without taking the entire firearm apart.
I guess let's circle back to July 28, 2021. Did you directly participate in the investigation of a homicide that occurred in Yellow River Park on previous day?
I did.
What was your role in that investigation?
I was contacted by the supervisor on scene, Supervisor Brittany Barrington, and was requested to come to the scene to recover or to retrieve those fired cartridge casings that had been located by Specialist Musey or Hamill, and to take those back to our unit to be uploaded into our system for a comparison against each other.
Did you collect those shell casings from
I did.
show you what's marked as State's Exhibit 21? What is State's Exhibit 21?
This is the package, and if I can see these. Yes, these are the two casings that I received at the scene from Specialist Musey.
How do you know?
Well, we have a pretty thorough chain of custody also. So it has a placard showing the case number where they were collected, but also just visually looking at them, they are the same mark, the same caliber, same color as the cartridges that I actually looked at.
And I will now show you State's Exhibit 24. You recognize State's Exhibits 24 through 29. Could you just describe each one?
I recognize the item in them, but the photographs are not mine. I believe these belong to Specialist Musey.
But are they, what is the item in them?
The item in them is going to be the two cartridge casings that I recovered from her at the scene. In fact, I can see the truck's lab bench in the background. And so this is going to be photographs of the two Aguila 9mm fired cartridge casings that I collected and entered.
Are they accurate depictions of the shell casings that were turned over to you and that are physically present in State's Exhibit 21?
They are.
Your Honor, State would tender State's Exhibits 24 through 29, a series of photographs of the aforementioned shell casings in State's Exhibit 21.
24 through 29 are admitted without objection.
show you what's admitted. State's Exhibit 24. What is State's Exhibit 24?
This is a photograph of one of the two 9mm shell casings that we were discussing previously, along with a note in Specialist Musey's handwriting, just designating this as evidence marker number 1.
So it's typical in CSI's lab amongst the analysts, investigators.
Mhm. Specialist.
That's not amongst the specialists. It's common to EM is evidence marker 1 is obviously 1.
That is correct.
And
That's the time that
09,
was recovered.
09 hours,
That's
not
correct.
most likely. And State's Exhibit 25.
If these are in order, this should be a side profile of that same first casing with a measuring device for scale. And this is going to be a top-down photograph of the head stamp showing that one of the two casings as a Gila 9mm.
And does it depict the firing pin stamp in the primer by the weapon fired?
Yes, if you look inside of the centermost circle, you have a circular shape, which is going to be the firing pin impression. This portion right here is going to be the firing.
And what characteristics of that allow you to compare it to the mark made by, or let me rephrase that. What characteristics of that allow you to compare it to a mark left on a different shell casing?
So the shape of it as well as striations found within it. Now with head stamps, we're not just looking for firing pins, we will look for ejector marks as well. And ejector marks are found on this outer rim, and here is a clearly defined rectangular mark, which will have individual striations in it as well that can be compared against another casing.
Skip out of order here. Let's show you State's Exhibit 29. What is State's, or describe for the jury what's in State's Exhibit 29.
So this is another photograph of a head stamp of one of the two casings, depicting that same circular shaped firing pin and also an ejector mark rectangular in fashion.
And in your opinion, based on your knowledge, training, and experience, can you tell whether or not these marks were left by the same weapon?
From these photographs, not 100%, I would need a microscopic image, but I did see them microscopically when they were uploaded, and they did appear to be from the same weapon.
And are you able to tell what type of weapon left that mark?
Unfortunately, no. I can't testify to what weapon it would have left it. Characteristics of the weapon, absolutely, but a firearms examiner would have to give that specific information.
Is it consistent with the characteristics of any weapon that you're
Yes, it is consistent with a P365.
Sweet. State's Exhibit 27.
This is a photograph that was taken by Specialist Musey of the second fire cartridge casing with evidence marker number 2 written beside.
And lastly, State's Exhibit 28.
And this is going to be another photograph of one of the two casings. I'm assuming the second based on the sequence, just showing the scale of that casing.
And I guess this is striations on the side.
The striations on the side of the casing.
I do this one.
Yes, no, we don't do comparisons of any striations on the side. Now there may be a portion of the extractor might leave a marking on the underside of the rim here, but I don't see that in this particular photo.
Okay. When you observe the microscope, did you see?
We don't typically use those as the sole comparison.
But what you were able to observe was enough to conclude that they have the same characteristics as being fired from P365.
Yes, I mean, they do have characteristics that would be consistent with that.
And whether or not they were, irrespective of the weapon they were fired from, the two shell casings were left by the same weapon.
They do appear, yes, they do appear to be similar and that they look like they came from the same firearm.
Did you take part in any other part of the investigation of this particular homicide?
Yes, I processed a vehicle that was brought in relation to this case.
What condition was that vehicle in?
When it was received, it appeared to have severe charring and burn marks throughout and on the exterior of the vehicle. There was no visible tag. The VIN number had been essentially obliterated. The glass was melted into the car. It looked like it had been on fire for a good period of time.
Were you able to determine where that vehicle came from, what kind of vehicle it was?
In terms of where it came from, that would be a question for the investigator or the officer that brought it in. However, we were able to identify a VIN number on the engine compartment of the vehicle that we were able to trace back to I believe a Nissan Versa, if I might reference my report.
You may. If it will refresh your recollection.
That was actually part of the detective's report, but it was a 4-door hatchback, and we were able to run the VIN numbers, but the actual make and model can be verified with the detective if necessary. But there was a Nissan emblem on the inside of the vehicle, and the VIN number 3N1BC1CP1CL364033 did return to a Nissan.
So it did return to a registered vehicle in the state?
It did. It did, as far as I know. I do not know the details of the registration, though.
Understood. Show you what's marked as State's Exhibit 32 through 37.
Thank you.
Can you describe what we're looking at? In State's Exhibits 32 through 37?
Yes, these are photographs that I did take of the vehicle in its state when it was received by our crime scene investigations unit. We documented the exterior, we being myself. I documented the exterior of the vehicle, the interior, and we also sifted through the debris inside for any items of possible evidence.
Were you able to locate any items of possible evidence?
We located a Nissan emblem, which was outside of the VIN, the only identifying information that we had at the time. We located that amongst the ash and debris in the floorboard in the front console area. We also located an aerosol can and I believe, red-colored coffee cup that were underneath the seats. We weren't sure of their evidentiary value, but those were the things that we could identify in the vehicle.
I'll go back to 32 through 37.
Yes.
Are those true and accurate depictions of the vehicle as it was in the evidence bay when it kind of CSI?
Yes, they are.
Has anything been added to them, removed from them, been altered?
They don't appear to have been.
They're all true and accurate depictions?
Yes.
Stay with gender State Exhibits 32 through 37.
All right, 32 through 37 are admitted without objection.
I'll show you what's marked as, or admitted as.
Are you asking to publish?
I am, Your Honor, I'm sorry.
You may publish.
I'm publishing State's Exhibit 32, which has been admitted. Can you describe to the jury what we're looking at?
Yes, this is a photograph from the rear driver's side window frame looking into the front cab of the vehicle. So here you are going to see what is left of the front driver's seat, front passenger seat, and then the dashboard components of the vehicle, as well as the insides of the door. You can see that the glass has been melted into the car, and most of the upholstery has been basically burnt to ash.
Showing you what's been admitted as State's Exhibit 33.
This is a side profile photograph of that same portion of the vehicle. Here you have the front passenger. Here is the front driver. And then this is the windshield that is melted over the dash component. However, you can see that all that's left are metal frames and pieces of glass. And all of the combustible materials have been turned to ash.
State's Exhibit 34. State's Exhibit 34.
This is a top-down photograph of the front driver's seat. Underneath, you can see the red colored cup that's located inside the vehicle. And then you can see a better view of some of the action material.
State's Exhibit 35.
This is an overall photograph of the engine compartment of the vehicle, with the focus of it being here inside of the engine compartment. This steel impressed plate is where we were able to find the VIN number to the vehicle. It was of course covered in ash, so it, but the VIN number to the vehicle is in this.
State's Exhibit 36.
This is the back end of the vehicle, just showing the state of the exterior. All paint appears to have been burned off of the vehicle, and also there is no intact license plate or even bumper on the back of the vehicle.
Now, a license plate in the state of Georgia, do you know what it's made of?
A license plate? Oh, I do not.
Do you know whether or not it's metal?
It is metal. It's, I'm assuming, an aluminum material, but it's, I don't know the exact composition of it.
Based on your observations, did you find a charred or burned license plate?
No, there was nothing inside the vehicle that appeared to resemble a license plate.
Lastly, State's 37.
This is the front end of the vehicle, again showing that all of the plastic and rubberized components of the vehicle have been burned off.
The vehicle is, let me ask you this, did you check for the things people think a CSI will go looking for DNA, fingerprints? Did you look for those things?
So we did rifle through, myself and Supervisor Barrington. We went through the ash and debris to see if we could find anything that was not entirely burned, so that we could attempt to retrieve DNA or fingerprints. However, unfortunately, every item in there had a layer of soot on the outside. And when you have an item that has been burned, it takes away from the viability of getting fingerprints and DNA off of those items. When you think about fingerprints, fingerprints are mostly water. So if you think about, if you set a cup of water out on a table on a hot day, eventually it's going to evaporate. The same thing happens with fingerprints. Now, if you introduce a very large heat source or a fire, that's going to happen more quickly. So fingerprints in a fire situation are very difficult, if not impossible, to recover. And DNA is part of a combustible material, flesh, bone, those sorts of things. And unfortunately, fire degrades those pretty severely in most cases. So we weren't able to find anything that resembled fingerprints or DNA in our search.
And I guess it's fair to say, just based on observation, that this was a fairly hot fire.
That is safe to say.
Was there any other duties that you performed in relation to this investigation?
I received, I believe the following day, a bag that was recovered by Investigator Smith that contained an aluminum, what appeared to be license plate from another location. I don't know the location where it was recovered. That did appear to have burns on it as well.
When you say a license plate, you mean like a vanity plate or a Georgia issued registration license plate?
Both. So there was a Georgia issued license plate that I wasn't able to like see anything on because it was just metal at that time. There was a plate, I guess the like plastic decals, like decorative plates that was around it that I was able to get a name off of, like a brand name, but we weren't able to get any kind of tag number or anything like that, because the way that license plates work, at least in Georgia, is the top layer is a foil, because that's what makes it reflective when people are behind you with their headlights, and foil burns really easily. So that portion was gone, but the actual, I guess, body of the plate was still there.
Is it the foil that contains the identifiable numbering?
Yes, unfortunately.
I think that's all the questions I have. Thank you.
You cross-examination?
The demonstrative,
It's under the exhibit up here.
Good afternoon. Can I call you Investigator Jimenez?
That's fine.
Thank you very much. I don't have a lot of questions, but let me start with this one. You indicated that a lot more of the semi-automatic guns have a right side ejected. Is that right?
That's correct.
Do you call it a right side ejection port?
It's a right side ejection port.
Fantastic. Okay, and a right side ejection port as opposed to a left side ejection port. Is that right?
That's correct.
And is that because most shooters are right-handed and the shell casing is going to be ejected away from them as opposed to left-handed, or do you know?
I don't know. I can't say to the design rationale.
I don't know. It's a fine answer. Stovepipe. Tell the jury what a stovepipe is.
So a stovepipe is basically when you go to fire a weapon, when the trigger is actually pulled. If for some reason the slide of the firearm is manipulated during that operation, so say that you grab the slide as it's actually racking back or as the trigger is being pulled, when it's going to stop that process of the cartridge casing being ejected midway through. So you'll get the cartridge casing halfway in the ejector, but caught in the gun. So it'll be sticking out. The stovepipe, I've heard, is referring to the way that it typically looks, with it like sticking out like a chimney or something like that.
And that's a mouthful.
Yes.
I want to understand.
Of course.
I want you to tell me. Don't let me tell you. Does stovepipe just mean that the fired cartridge casing does not eject out of the gun?
It means that it doesn't eject fully, so it'll be partially hanging out of the ejector port.
Does somebody have to touch the slide in order for that to happen?
It's not mandatory. That is the scenario where you see it most of the time, because that directly interferes with the slide, opening all the way so that it can be ejected. But it can happen if there's a malfunction with the slide by itself.
All right. And it sounds like when there's a stovepipe, I'm gonna call it the back of the fired cartridge casing, which would be what's it called? The
head stamp.
Head stamp. It sounds like the head stamp would be stuck in the gun while the hollow portion is facing out. Is that right?
So it kind of, oh gosh, I'm trying to demonstrate it. If you have the casings.
You're removing that one exhibit. So
Judge, this is State's exhibit number 21. I've just opened it. I haven't removed it because I think it's attached in here. I think it's attached with some tape though, so we may be able to remove it both from. I've removed one of the cartridge casings. It's marked EM number 1 from State's exhibit number 21, and I'm going to ask for permission to remove the actual cartridge casing, the fire cartridge casing. This is what you need, right?
Yes,
okay.
that and the
Fantastic.
replica.
I'll give you both of them. Here you go. Okay, sorry.
No, that's all right. Just have it. Always wearing gloves. All right. So when you have a stovepipe, typically you are going to, just for the sake of the demonstration, you are going to have the cartridge casing, and it's going to be partially ejected. Trying to think the best way to have this represented for you guys. You're going to have a portion of that cartridge sticking out, but the rest of it is going to still be inside of the firearm with this slide preventing it from exiting. So where it falls on this half of the cartridge casing, there's no way for that to be controlled. It can be, midway down. It could be even like on the very tail end, so that, most of it's still in the firearm, or it could be near this head stamp crimping where most of it is hanging out of the firearm.
How do you clear it? Can you pick it out sometimes?
So you'll have to actually rack the slide back to have it open the rest of the way so that you can get this out.
All right, sometimes you can do it that way. If I understood the testimony, sometimes you have to take the slide apart. You have to take the gun apart?
Yes, you would have to take the firearm apart.
Okay. Since it's out, let me just use it for a second. Judge, and I have what's part of the exhibit. It was marked EM number 1. I have some questions about this. If the fired shell casing, right, right here, can we tell if this is a 6 Sauer P365, can we tell if the gun is in this position, or this position, or this position, based on where the round is?
No, shell casings and the whole process of a firearm being fired creates basically a controlled explosion, but it's only controlled in that the projectile is going to go down the barrel and so on. As far as the casing that is ejected from the firearm, you could shoot the same firearm from the same position multiple times and have them land in multiple different locations because it's just going to happen at random. It's going to go in the direction of the ejector port, so it's going to go to the right typically, but I have had guns that will, eject straight up, which, it can be misleading, with the actual where the location of the ejector port is. But yeah, you can't tell where the gun 100% is based on it.
So if this were a 6 Sauer P365, I can fire 5 rounds. One might land at the judge. One might land over the deputy by the door. One might land right here on the floor.
That's correct. And you also have external forces that could play a part of it, bouncing off of the ground, people walking through the scene, potentially moving them, things like that.
I'm just using an example right here. I think this is as controlled as you can get. There's no
Yes,
wind
this
here.
situation, you might have bounce on the ground, but
And if I fire this 5 times, one's going to land at the judge, might land at the judge. One might land up in the lighted fixture if it goes up.
yeah, that's possible.
One might land over by the deputy. Is that right?
That's
One
possible.
might land behind me with the woman in the yellow.
Now, I mean, you distance might be a thing. I can't say like how far they will fly because you do have limitations on the explosion. But as far as directionality, yes, they can go multiple directions.
So it's almost impossible to predict from looking at where the shell casing is where the gun was when the gun was fired. Is that fair to say?
You might be able to get a general, but you can't get an exact.
And when we say general, we know that if it's the right ejection or the gun was somewhere to the right.
Yeah,
To the left of where the round is.
typically, yes.
Right. After that, we have no clue.
Personally, no.
Let me return this. Then. Yeah, thank you. Investigator Jimenez, you testified that the rounds that you examined have the characteristic of a 6 Sauer P365. Is that right?
Yes, they are consistent.
Okay. And I'm just trying to get some sense. If you can tell me what other guns may have fired those 2 rounds.
Oh gosh, I can't give you an exhaustive list, but I mean, so those are consistent in that 6 Sauer typically has a circular firing pin. There are other firearms that have circular firing pins and similar ejector markings, but they're not going to be similar in their individual striations. But what we're doing is class characteristics. Class characteristics like firing pin will tell you that, or if you look at a 6 Sauer, then they're going to have circular, whereas like Glock will have a rectangular or D-shaped firing pin. So it's consistent with it. That doesn't mean that it's not consistent with other mates that have circular firing pins as well, but the individual specific striations are what are going to make it those 2 linked together.
Okay. What I heard you say is all 6 Sauers. Is that what you said? That's what I heard you say, but I'm not sure you said that. All
Many 6 Sauers. Yeah.
Okay, many. So when we say many, more than 50% of all the models of 6 Sauer is going to have those characteristics. Is that right?
In terms of the firing pin itself, yes. Most manufacturers of firearms, they're going to have a design that they go with. So to reference Glocks again, they are exhaustively or exclusively going to use that same shaped firing pin of like a D-shaped after a certain model because that is their trademark. So a lot of other firearm manufacturers do that same thing.
Do you know how many 6 Sauers fire a 9mm round?
Not off the top of my head, no.
Okay.
But 9mm is your most common caliber.
I got you. And I understand you to be saying that a Glock could not have fired these 2 rounds. Is that right?
Based on the characteristics that I saw. No.
And I don't know if does Colt make a 9mm?
I mean, I believe so, but I don't know off the top of my head theirs. I'm less familiar with Colt.
Okay. And Remington?
Remington?
Yes.
Um,
Make a 9mm?
Yeah, Remington makes 9mm.
And so I understand you to be saying in terms of 6 Sauers, the 2 fired cartridge casings that you examined have the characteristics of a 6 Sauer.
Yes.
Like irrespective of this, if it's a 365, 465, 165, it has the characteristics of a Sig Sauer that fires a 9mm. Is that right?
Yes.
How many other, I'm gonna call it manufacturers,
Oh my goodness.
Remington, Colt, however many, Desert Eagle.
Right.
I'm not the gun guy. How many other brands of gun had that same characteristic?
Several. I can't give you a number just because there are many off brands that obviously I wouldn't have an exhaustive knowledge about. You have Russian firearms and things like that. They're also going to have circular firing pins, but we don't necessarily see them. But it is going to be several. The circular firing pin shape is common.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Thank you, Judge.
All right, recross examination. Right. Thank you. You can step down, please. Somebody on the jury need a break? Or next witness. I'm sorry, Santa Maria. So watch your step coming around. If you will be seated comfortably in the chair and position yourself directly in front of the microphone, please.
Raise your right hand. You swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give in this matter now pending before the court shall be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
Please introduce yourself to the jury.
My name is Jonathan Santa Maria.
How are you employed?
I'm currently employed with the Columbia County Sheriff's Office.
And are you a post-certified law enforcement officer?
I am.
Deputy Santa Maria, how were you employed in August of 2021?
I was employed with the DeKalb County Police Department.
In your duties, what were your basic duties with DeKalb County?
It's everyday patrol on uniform calls.
And did you receive a call about, and I don't know how DeKalb would have classified it, but about an abandoned or burned vehicle in, I think it would have been August 1st, 2021?
Yes, sir. I responded to an abandoned vehicle call located at the Hidden Acres National Park.
And what is Hidden Acres National Park?
Yeah, we have where I used to work, we had several different just parks in the area located especially in my precinct alone.
Did you respond physically to the scene?
We received a call from a park ranger. I believe his name was Park Ranger Curtis. He called us in reference to a burned vehicle that was abandoned, appeared to have been there for a few days, and I was the one who was dispatched to the location.
Did your, I guess, role in this investigation, were you able to determine how it got there, when it got there?
No.
I'm going to show you what Marcus States exhibit 39.
You're skipping 38.
I believe 38 was one of the last photographs shown to CSI Jimenez.
Let me confirm with the court reporter. Do you have a 38 marked? No 38 was marked.
This will be, I'm going to show you what's marked as States Exhibit 38. What is States Exhibit 38?
That is the vehicle that I was brought to by the park ranger located at the park.
Is that a true and accurate depiction of that vehicle?
Correct.
Has anything been altered about this photograph?
No.
You understand with tender States Exhibit 38?
All right, 38 is admitted without objection. Yes.
Is States Exhibit 38, is this the vehicle that you found?
Correct.
What did you do when you got to see it now? Part of it?
I spoke to Park Ranger Curtis. He informed me that there was a murder that occurred in Gwinnett County, which is just one jurisdiction over from us, very close to the location we were at. He informed me that they were looking for a blue Nissan Versa. I approached the vehicle. I couldn't find any sort of identifying VIN and or tag to identify the vehicle. I did locate a Nissan emblem, which I then looked up the vehicle online and saw that it was matching what I could say was assumed to be the vehicle that is a Nissan Versa.
And did you contact Gwinnett County?
Correct. I contacted a Gwinnett County sergeant, and he arrived on scene shortly after.
And did you turn the vehicle over to Gwinnett County?
Correct. They said they were going to obtain it for further investigation.
Did the Gwinnett County Police Department take possession of the vehicle from the scene?
They called their own record service to take it to their lot.
And did you have any other role in this investigation after turning the vehicle over to Gwinnett?
Cross-examination.
single area of DeKalb County where the vehicle, the burnt out vehicle was located?
For that day, or how long I was
During the time that you were enforcement in DeKalb County?
from October of 2020 to December of 2022.
Okay, more than 2 years, so you were familiar with that area, is that fair to say?
Yes, sir.
Stone Mountain area near Stevenson High School?
Correct.
I think the nearest school there is Stevenson Middle, is that right?
I believe that is correct.
Okay, all right, good. How would you describe that area in terms of crime? Low crime area, high crime area? How would you describe it, you being there for 2+ years?
About a medium to high crime area, depending on the area.
Medium to high crime area, a lot of cars being broken into,
Yes, sir.
cars being taken?
Yes, sir.
Do you have a whole lot of cars, in my mind, it's like Beirut, do you have a whole lot of burnt out cars where cars are getting burnt out?
Not that I'm familiar with.
Okay, good. In the 2+ years that you were there, how many car fires did you respond to where it was just an abandoned car just burning out of control in the 2.5 years?
This is the only one that I can recall.
Got it. So although there may be car break-ins and car thefts, you don't have too many just sort of cars engulfed in flames. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
When you come upon the vehicle is in the condition as we see in the photograph, right? It's already burnt out. Is that right?
That's correct.
There's no fire trucks there. It's already done. Is that right?
Correct.
Were you able to see if there was any report made at any time in the 48 hours prior to or in the week prior to you discovering the car or somebody pointing out the car to you? Were you able to discern if there was any reports of a car being on fire?
Not that I'm familiar with.
So when you arrive, the fire's all done, but you don't know when the car was actually burnt up. Is that fair to say?
Correct.
Thank you very much. No further questions. Thank you, Judge.
Redirect.
No, Your Honor.
All right, you can step down, sir. Thank you.
Your Honor, I request a brief recess on plan the rest of the day. The rest of the day will be filled, but I just need to numbers talking to see how schedules are, because I may have to ask some of that.
You just need to step out in the hallway to check that?
I can probably do that.
Okay, we'll just be at ease to allow you to do that. Anybody wants to stand up and stretch, you can.
Just to grab some water right quick, Judge.
All right, you ready to call your next witness?
Investigator Strickland?
Afternoon.
Raise your right hand, please. Do you swear or affirm the testimony that you're about to give in this matter now pending before the court to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, sir.
Please introduce yourself to the jury.
Investigator Jason Stribling, Gwinnett County Arson.
And are you also a person post-certified law enforcement officer?
Yes, sir.
And what does an arson investigator do?
Primarily, we look at fires that are either suspicious in nature or that the fire department does not know how they started to determine a cause and origin.
How many times have you, or is there any training or education that you received to do that job?
Yes, we have two 80-hour courses, Arson 1 and Arson 2, that we complete at the Georgia Public Safety Training Center. Further of that, the International Association of Arson Investigators has a fire investigation technician certification that we obtain, and I just obtained earlier in the year my certified fire investigator credentials from the IAAI as well, which is roughly a 5-year process.
Were you so assigned, so employed, and so educated in July or August of 2021?
I did not have my CFI at the time, but other than that, yes, sir.
I want to show you what's been previously admitted as State's Exhibit 38. You recognize State's Exhibit 38?
Yes, sir.
What is it?
That's a vehicle that I had a brief encounter with at the GCPD lot.
Is that the same vehicle in State's Exhibit 36?
That is actually the one at the lot at the time I saw it.
That's exactly as you saw it.
Yes, sir.
And in State's Exhibit 35?
That appears to be the engine compartment of the same vehicle.
34.
That is the passenger compartment of that vehicle.
And 32.
And again, another picture of the passenger compartment of that vehicle.
I guess as an arson investigator, someone with your education, background, and experience, what can you tell me about the fire that did this in this vehicle?
The fire appeared to have started on the interior compartment of the vehicle, the passenger compartment. And that's really about as far as I can go on this one. I did not do a full examination of this for an origin and cause investigation. I was there to assist GCPD.
Now, what would I'm going to put State's Exhibit 32 up. You said the fire appears to have started in the passenger compartment.
Yes, sir.
Is the location where you believe the fire started contained in State's 32?
It's roughly in the front seat area. You can see the oxidation.
There's a pointer right.
Thank you. You can see the oxidation, the rusting down here at the base. Typically, that's where the high heat would have originated inside of that vehicle. After several days, the oxidation tends to be more and more. You can kind of follow the pattern back towards that. Back towards the area of origin. I'm sorry. Excuse that.
Just stop with that.
Sorry.
Would you describe this fire as intense?
There's nothing that could not burn is left on there, so everything is gone.
Now, you said in a full investigation, there are different things you might have done. As far as you know, where was this car found?
In DeKalb County.
And is there any indication that the fire occurred in Gwinnett County?
Not at all.
As such, would it have been the responsibility of DeKalb County arson investigator to conduct an investigation into the arson?
Yes, sir.
Do you know if they did?
I'm not familiar with that. I don't believe so, but I'm not completely sure.
That's all the questions I have, Mr. Commissioner.
Cross-examination?
It's sort of interesting what you raised. Someone with Gwinnett County went and picked up the vehicle in its burnt out condition in DeKalb and brought it back to Gwinnett. Is that right?
That's my understanding.
And it's a normal procedure. I don't necessarily assume that there is, but in that situation, since you're not doing a full investigation, would you then be contacting DeKalb? Like, what's the process with that interjurisdictional issue?
I was called over to bring evidence cans that we would take samples in for GCPD since it wasn't our investigation. They were requesting those materials that we have. Once I took them there, I asked them if DeKalb was involved, and they were not sure, so I gave them a contact to DeKalb County Arson. I don't know what happened beyond that, though.
Okay, so once you brought over the materials, you didn't actually do any more investigation?
I did a 360 of the vehicle and told them my opinion of just on the 360, but it was not an official full investigation. I didn't take samples or anything that I would have.
So you had been in arson about 6 years at that point?
Roughly.
Okay, so you sort of eyeballed it walking around and you could tell, okay, they got burnt out. Could you tell if there was an accelerant that was used?
No, sir. I could, if we would have, our area of origin, we would have taken a sample and that would have sent off to the lab, and only that lab can tell us whether an accelerant was actually used or not.
I got you. You didn't do that.
No, sir.
And you don't know if the cab did that.
I'm not familiar.
And you weren't the point person to get in touch with the cab to make sure that they.
I just passed on a contact number.
Thank you very much, Investigator Strickland. Thank you, Judge.
Redirect?
No, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. You may step down and be excused.
Okay.
All right, call your next witness.
Tanya Lang.
All right, good afternoon, Ms. Lang. I'm well. Ma'am, just watch your step coming around for me, please. And then take your time, get seated comfortably in the chair. And if you can slide yourself all the way up to that microphone for me, please. Thank you.
Raise your right hand, please. You swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give in this matter now pending before the court shall be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, help you God.
Yes, I do.
Please introduce yourself to the court.
My name is Tanya Lane.
And Ms. Lang, who is Tori Lang to you?
My granddaughter.
To show you what has previously been admitted. As State's Exhibit number 2.
We hear Ms.
Oh.
Lang. Do you see that?
Who's depicted in State's Exhibit number 2?
I'm sorry,
Who is that depicted in State's Exhibit number 2?
that's Tori. That's my granddaughter.
Um, Tell me a little bit about your granddaughter, man.
A little bit.
Just a little bit.
Okay. Yeah, because we could be a while. Tori was, if I had to sum it up in one word, I would say phenomenal. She was very intellectually inclined, very smart girl, honor student, AP student, tutored other AP students. She really was a smart girl, but she was witty, she was funny. And the most amazing thing about her, she was so compassionate. She was generous to the nth degree. She just was a phenomenal girl. She really was.
Did she ever live with you?
Yeah.
Did she, at the time she died, did she have a car?
Yes, she did.
What kind of car was it?
It was a, can't remember the name of it. I'm not good with cars. Ask me what color it was, what it looked like on the inside, but don't ask me what it is, make or model. It was a little blue, oh man, I can't think of the name of it, but it was a little blue car.
Who was the registered legal owner of that car?
I was.
I'm going to show you what's marked as State's Exhibit number 39. What is State's Exhibit 39? What is it?
It's the title to the car.
Is that a true and accurate copy of the title to your car that Tori drove?
Yes. Yes.
And has anything been added to it, taken away from it? Your Honor, State would tender State's Exhibit 39.
All right, 39 is admitted without objection.
Do you know what happened to your car, Ms. Lang?
I learned that after Tori's passing, we had been searching for the car. And maybe about a week or so after her passing, we learned that the car had been found and it had been burnt. It had been torched.
Also going to show you what's been admitted as, all right, sorry, what is labeled as State's Exhibit 40. What is State's Exhibit 40?
Motor vehicle dealer title is reassignment supplement. Okay.
I'm sorry, when you're ready to answer, if you would just speak in that microphone for me, please.
Yes, ma'am.
Is this a true and accurate copy of the supplemental title report to your vehicle?
It is.
And is that your name listed as owner?
Yes.
And was this the vehicle that Tori drove?
Yes, the Versa, yes.
Your Honor, State would tender State's Exhibit 40.
All right, 40 is admitted without objection.
I'm not going to make you read it, but is the VIN number located on both of these documents?
Yes.
And when the car was found, did as far as you know, did the officers tell you how they identified the car?
No.
Was it registered in your name?
Yes.
Did you give anyone permission to, other than Tori, to take that car?
No.
Did you give permission to anyone to incinerate that car?
No, absolutely not.
Do you know the defendant, Austin Ford?
Yes.
Has you ever met him before?
Yes.
Did you know him to be an acquaintance of Tori's?
Yes.
Did he have permission to have, take, or use your car?
No. No, sir.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Cross-examination.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I don't have a lot of questions, and I don't have any objection to Tori's photo staying up, Judge. After Tori graduated from high school, did she ever live with you?
Yeah, she lived between her parents and me. We lived around the corner from each other, so she had two homes.
All right, and when she would stay with you, would she stay for like a week, a month, 6 months, or was it like Monday, Wednesday, Thursday with you, and then other part of the week she'd stay with her mom?
Oh, it was no set timing in that. We shared her.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Did she have a key to your home?
Oh yes.
Okay, good. So she had her own room in your home?
She and I shared a room.
Okay, all right. So if it was a Sunday night, it was nothing for you after Tori graduated from high school in 2021 to 3. Tori knock on the door, sort of pop up on a Sunday?
Well, Tori, after Tori graduated, I became, I have lupus, I have COPD, I have severe rheumatoid arthritis, and I have fibromyalgia and Raynaud's syndrome. So Tori spent a lot of time with me outside of what she did, hanging out with her friends and working and stuff like that. So she really became more of my caregiver.
I got you.
Yeah.
I got you. And then the 14 months in between the time that she graduated high school and she died, about how much of that time did she end up living with you? Was it half the time, 90% of the time?
I have.
About half the time. And prior to her graduating high school, did she spend about half her time with you also while she was in high school?
Not so much.
Not so much, more after she graduated.
Yes.
All right. And during the time when she was staying with you, was she working?
She did.
All right. What
She always had a job. She always had a job. She was, I guess what you call the word, industrious. She prided herself on being independent. So if I'm not mistaken, my recollection, Tori might have started working when she was about 14 years old. Yeah.
in July of 2021, when all of this tragedy befell your family, do you recall where Tori was working at that time?
At that time, I do recall, because I really did not like what she was doing, but she was really good at it. She was doing DoorDash.
Okay. She was delivering food.
Yes.
I got you. And in July of 2021, that fateful month, was she living with you then?
No,
Okay.
not in that era.
I got you.
Yeah.
I got you. In the 50% of the time that Tori lived with you after high school, but before her untimely death, would Austin Ford come over and hang out with her at your home?
Outside, yeah, they'd be hanging out in the car. Yeah.
Fair enough. Did Austin Ford ever come into your home during that time between May of 2020 and July of 2021?
No, he did not. No.
Did you forbid him from coming in the house, or he just wasn't the type that knock on the door, pop up, and just, hey, I'm here to see Tori?
Oh no, I didn't forbid him. It's just like, I don't know. I guess she knew I wasn't into the kind of music they like to do. You know, they had I mean, they could have came in if they wanted to, but that was their choice.
I got you.
Yeah.
I got you. Thank you very much, Ms. Lang.
You're more than welcome.
Any redirect?
Briefly, Ms. Lang, is it fair to say that before Tori graduated from high school, you needed less caregiving than after?
I'm sorry, would you repeat that question?
Ask the question a different way. You listed a number of conditions that you're living with.
Right.
Have they caused, your functionality to deteriorate over the years?
Oh, absolutely.
And so while Tori was in high school, did you need less help than the time after Tori graduated from high
That's
school?
correct. That's correct. And my condition, they kind of work together. Like if I'm having a lupus flare, it automatically triggers my arthritis. So the two together working, I'm balled up in a knot because the tension, joint pain, stuff like that. But yeah, it was less. It really became real severe with her passing. With her passing, I went into deep depression, lost a lot of weight, like a whole nother person. My condition just got worse, and I saw therapy. It didn't do a lot of good because everywhere I go, everything I see, like my daughter has a room full of pictures. I can't do that. I can't. I would love to, but I feel like it would be a shrine or something like that. You know what I'm saying? And I just can't bear to look at it because it brings me to that dark place that she's just not here anymore. No.
I understand. Thank you, Ms. Lang.
All right, Ms. Lang, thank you so much. Be careful.
Thank
Just
you.
watch your step coming down. The bailiff will assist you. All right, thank you. All right, please call your next witness.
Eddie Reeves.
All right, good afternoon. Watch your step coming around for me.
Yes, ma'am.
Will be seated and position yourself in front of the microphones, please.
Mr. Hand, please, you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give in this matter now pending before the court to be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
Please introduce yourself to the jury.
Hi, my name is Eddie Reeves with the Gwinnett County Medical Examiner's Office.
And what is your role with the Gwinnett County Medical Examiner's Office?
I'm an investigator at the Medical Examiner's Office.
And what training and education do you have that allows you to complete those duties?
Prior to working for the Medical Examiner's Office, I was 13 years as a sheriff's deputy in Hall County, where I amassed over 3,000 hours of crime scene schools, blood pattern analysis, wound analysis, things like that. And I've been with the Medical Examiner's Office since 2002.
And as what are the basic duties, what's the basic role of an investigator at the ME's office?
The investigator will take the call of death from the reporting agency, the police department or hospital. The investigator will decide if it is a case that fits under the Georgia Death Investigation Act and if Gwinnett County has the jurisdiction. The investigator then will obtain information from the caller to see if we need to make a scene evaluation of the case. Cases that include injuries or trauma, unnatural events, we would respond to at the scene.
And did you receive a call that warranted the attention of the medical examiner on July 28th, 2021?
Yes, sir, I did.
Imagining that you might have received one, did one of the calls or the call that you received that day involve the body of a young lady found at Yellow River Park?
Yes, it did.
Did you go to the scene?
I did.
What did you do with the scene?
I helped process the scene. I had a trainee with me, so I was instructing her as well. But our function at the scene is to evaluate what, if any, injuries we can see, take photographs, collect any evidence that's pertinent for the medical examiner's office and the medical examiner to rule on cause and manner of death.
And did you do that on that day at Yellow River Park?
I did.
I'm going to show you. Station 4155.
Is it something we can address at the bench or not? If not, that's fine. Okay. Let me go ahead and make this more of your mid-afternoon break. And when we come back, then plan to go through as close to 5 o'clock or when the state runs out of witnesses today. So let's be in recess until 3:50, and then we'll go to the end of the day, the end of the court day.
Looks like we don't go straight to break, that we have some business outside of the jury's presence for a bit.
Witness to step in?
No, okay. Especially, if I can hand these up to you, 41 through
55.
55. Judge, obviously, Judge, my objection really goes to some of the photos being duplicative. It's got nothing really to do with this witness. Specifically 41 and 49.
Okay, are those the specific ones you want me to look at?
Yes, 41 and 49. That's the pairing that I have right now, which is the easiest ones to deal with. Obviously, there are going to be photos that are going to be shown. Some of the photos are going to be before Tori's head is shaved, so we can see stippling or whatever we're going to see. I don't have any objection to the clothing being shown. It's not graphic for me. I think some of this is going to be a little bit graphic for the jury. They've seen a number of photos already in terms of body cam videos and additional videos from the crime scene folk that show how she was found. And obviously, some of these close-up shots are going to have to be shown to the jury. My only argument is that some of what is contained in 41 through 55 is duplicative. I can easily point out 41 and 49. I think they're probably probably 2 more pairings, which would be a total of 6. I think it's duplicative. I think it's a bit gory, and so I just raised that issue. Obviously, my objection would be to the extent that it's duplicative, to the extent that it's gory, it's especially prejudicial to my client.
Let me hear the state's response.
Your Honor, the determination made by the medical examiner is largely, and a lot of it is based on the autopsy itself and the condition in which the body is found, the circumstances under which the body is found, the manner of the wound. All of those things are necessary for Dr. Terry to explain the findings. It is certainly not the state's intention to make things just simply to introduce exhibits for the purpose of gore. There, with one exception, there will not be any photos of the autopsy itself. Notably, since we're addressing the matter, since the investigator has brought up the issue of gore, there is one photo that was not being introduced through investigator reviews, but through Dr. Terry, that is of the inside of Tori's skull that shows the path that the bullet took from entry to the point where it terminated.
Okay, let me have everybody pause because I have 2 sets of photos that are marked 53, 54, and 55 that are not the same. So I've got set A of 53, 54, and 55, and set B of 53, 54, and 55. So I need to know which ones I'm considering.
I think I handed too much to.
Otherwise, I have 41 through 57, with the exception of those 3 that are 2 different sets of 2 different photos. So I need to correct 53, 54, and 55. All right, let Mr. Lewis see and then take back what you don't want me to consider. And let's not mix them up with what's actually being admitted, so.
53, 54, 55 that the prosecutor's handed to me, which I assume is going to be his real 53, 54, 55. I don't have any objection to Judge.
Okay, now you can conclude your argument now that I know what photos I'm looking at, Mr. Norris Lewis.
And there is one photograph that will likely, if Mr. Lawrence Lewis is arguing is Tori, this is probably the most, but it is one that Dr. Terry specifically asked for to illustrate wound pattern.
Well, I'm not addressing that if it's not being sought to be tendered by the state right now. I'm not addressing that.
Yes, sir.
Any final word from the defense?
Judge, we're not commenting on that. Judge, respectfully, the photos that you've been handed up, I don't recall from the first trial how many of those photos Dr. Terry needed. Obviously, I think photos where Ms. Lang's head with a bullet into her skull is going to be needed to testify about sibling, gunpowder, things of that nature. So that part I'm sort of clear on. She will need that. I don't know that she's going to need, if you look at, again, I go back to 41 and 49, I don't know that 41 and 49 are going to be photos that Dr. Terry's going to need. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I don't have in my mind right now all of her prior testimony, all of the photographs that she used to render her expert opinion. So I have to sort of rely on my first argument that some of the photos, especially, I'm not worrying about the clothing, the photos of not the photos not being part of the head shavings, the photos where we have blood and the close-up shots of the entrance wound, which I can specifically tell you is 41 and 49, but I want to say that there's at least one other set of the photo of that, of where the bullet would have entered her brain, where it's not shaved, it's not cleaned up.
All right, having considered the state's motion to tender States 41 through 55. Well, you actually said 51 through 55, but you've handed me through 57. So are you seeking to tender through 57? Do you want to see 56 and 57?
I had to renumber on the fly. And
55, 54. Okay, those are all the clothing shops. So you're seeking to tender 41 through 57? All right, having considered the argument of the state to tender, states 41 through 57, and the objection from the defense, over objection, I will allow each of the exhibits 41 through 57 to be admitted. And I'm saying over objection, but the defense is not objecting to all of them, but specifically, I believe 41 and 47.
49.
41
and 49 is, if you hand me those, I can tell you the ones that I think are the judge.
Yes.
I stand for just to clarify the record.
Sure.
41 and 49. Uh, 47, Judge, and 48. 43 and 45.
Right, so all are being admitted, subject to objections that are made by the defense, and those objections are noted for the record.
Yes, Judge.
All right, so that gives you probably about 5 more minutes before the jury's gonna come back. Do you all want to take a restroom break?
Yes, thank you, Judge.
All right, 5 minutes. Mr. Ford is back with the deputies, and the witness can step down for a few minutes. Thank you. Let me get, hi, thank you. We're good. I'm sorry. We're good. Thank you so much. All right, you may resume your examination.
I am going to show Investigator Reeves' series of photographs that got taken out of order already. 1 second. We'll start with what's marked as State's Exhibit 41. What is State's Exhibit 41?
It's a close-up photograph of the injury of Miss Lane, to the injury to the head.
State's Exhibit 42.
Well, I guess what recognizes them because they haven't been admitted, but he is testifying to what they actually are. So
I will start over, Your Honor.
thank you.
I'm going to show you what are marked as State's Exhibit 41 through 42 through 57. You take a look at them and tell me if you recognize them.
I do.
Is each one a true and accurate depiction of what's contained in the exhibit?
They are.
Has anything been added to, removed from, changed about the photographs?
No, sir.
Your Honor, State would tender State's Exhibits 41 through 57.
My objection is was addressed already, Judge. That would be my only objection.
All right, states 41 through 57 are admitted subject to the defense's objections that are preserved on the record.
Can you tell me what the purpose of these photographs are?
The investigators at the scene will photo document the victim, the individual at the scene, for documentary purposes and for evidence. The investigator will then attend the autopsy of the individual to take photographs at the direction of Dr. Carol Terry, the medical examiner for Gwinnett County, to photo document the exam, injuries, evidence, etc., that she deems is important during the examination.
Does Dr. Terry go to the scene of an individual there?
Not usually. She has in the past. She relies on her investigators to do that. She obviously, one person cannot attend all of those scenes.
So you attended the scene in this death?
Yes, sir, I did.
And did you relay whatever observations that you made as well as these photographs to Dr. Terry?
Yes, we briefed Dr. Terry on what we see, what injuries is apparent, with limited manipulation of the individual, so that we can do it in a more controlled environment, such as the morgue when Dr. Terry conducts her examination.
I'm not going to publish at this time, but I'm going to ask you to describe the contents of State's Exhibit 41.
It's a close-up photograph of the injury to Ms. Lang's head. On
State's
the,
Exhibit
what's
40,
that?
42. I'm sorry, did you have more to say?
On the right side of her head
State's Exhibit 42.
is an overall of Ms. Lang from the waist up at the scene, position of her hands, arms, hair, her clothing, etc.
State's Exhibit 43.
Close-up of the left side of Ms. Lang's head showing blood flow as it relates to the injury to the head.
State's Exhibit 44.
Close-up of the same left side of the head showing the blood flow from the eye, which had pooled from the nose.
State's Exhibit 45.
And overall of the left side of the head showing blood flow.
State's Exhibit 46.
The back of Ms. Lang at the scene, we do the front, and then we roll the individual over to look at the back to see if there's any injury or trauma that needs to be documented. We also will pull up clothing to see the skin itself, see if there's anything that is being covered by the by the clothing.
State's Exhibit 47.
Overall of the right side of Ms. Lang's head showing the injury in relation to her lying on the ground there at the scene and her hair around it.
State's Exhibit 48.
Overall of the scene, Ms. Lang at the scene showing her head, the ground to her right, and the blood flow from the injury.
State's Exhibit 49.
Close up of the injury showing the injury as it was, and some stippling that you can see.
State's Exhibit 50.
Blood transfer on the right thigh of Ms. Lang. A close up.
Now you call that blood transfer. What does blood transfer mean?
Blood transfer is blood that's been transferred from one source to another. There's no injury associated with the area of this blood, so therefore it had to be transferred there somehow by somebody or something.
Did you take a sample of that blood?
I did not know.
Was a sample of that blood taken?
Yes,
Was it taken at the medical examiner's office?
it would have been taken, yes, at the medical examiner's office.
Do you know who took that sample?
No, sir.
State's Exhibit 51.
Ms. Lang's lower extremities, the back of the lower extremities in that rolled position, showing some debris.
State's Exhibit 52.
Photograph of Ms. Lang's right side of Ms. Lang's head at the autopsy after Dr. Terry has shaved around the injury. I attended the autopsy, showing an unobstructed view of the injury and stippling associated with that injury.
State's Exhibit 53.
A close-up of the same injury in each of the photograph of 52 and 53. There's a ABF02 scale, American Board of Forensic Odontology scale, which gives some reference to size and things as a measurement on it.
And State's Exhibits 54 through 57.
The clothing, the shirt in which Ms. Lang was wearing at the time, the back, this is the back of the shirt. I was demonstrating when I took this photograph that there was no drag marks on it.
Did you take any biological samples, or do you take biological samples when you are either at the scene or in the medical examiner's office?
I do not.
Okay. That's all the questions I have at this time. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
No questions? All right, thank you, Investigator Reeves. You may step down. And call your next witness, please.
Carol Terry.
Good afternoon, Dr. Terry. And I think, Mr. Wooten, if we can, I know Dr. Terry's testimony tends to be long, if we could leave the water over there so that she can access it if she needs it, please.
Thank you.
If you could just grab some.
Please,
Okay, all right.
can I have something a little bigger than that?
Do we have anything bigger or any of the small bottles? He'll accommodate.
Thank you so much.
All right, thank you, sir.
Thank
All
you.
right. You may swear in your witness.
Dr. Terry, raise your right hand, please. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give in this matter now pending before the court shall be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Please introduce yourself to the jury.
My name is Dr. Carol Terry. I function as the Chief Medical Examiner for Gwinnett County. I'm a forensic pathologist.
What education, training, experience do you have that allows you to serve as a medical examiner and a forensic pathologist?
Okay. In 1986, I graduated from Emory College of Emory University with a Bachelor of Arts in Religion and a Bachelor of Science in Biology. From 1986 to 1990, I attended Emory University School of Medicine, where I received my Doctor of Medicine degree. So I am an MD. From 1990 to 1995, I did a specialty in medicine of pathology, and this was at the Emory University affiliated hospital systems, and I did a combined 5-year program of anatomic and clinical pathology. Thank you. Pathology is the study of disease, and anatomic pathology involves diagnosing disease states from tissues, such as biopsies from living people, tissues and organs from people obtained at the time of surgery, and autopsy specimens. Clinical pathology is the laboratory medicine aspect of pathology and involves liquid-based pathology, diagnosing disease states from fluids such as blood, urine, saliva, and things of that nature, and involves such areas of medicine as chemistry, hematology, microbiology, and blood banking. Now, during the last year of my 5-year residency, I got to work exclusively at the Fulton County Medical Examiner's Office in a subspecialty of pathology, forensic pathology. Forensic pathology is the medical legal investigation of death. And so I spent a year in the Fulton County Medical Examiner's Office that ended in 1995. From 1995 to 1996, I did an additional year of training in forensic pathology at the Fulton County Medical Examiner's Office. And this year of training outside of the residency was referred to as a fellowship year. But because I already had a year of experience in that office doing those same duties, I was essentially treated like a junior attending, and I got to supervise other individuals in training at that point in time. At the conclusion of my fellowship year in 1996, I stayed on staff at the Fulton County Medical Examiner's Office as an associate medical examiner, and I held that position until 2004. And I guess to back up a little bit, as a medical examiner in Fulton County, it was our job to investigate deaths that were sudden, unexpected, unexplained, or due to non-natural causes. And as the medical examiner investigating those deaths, it was our job to determine a cause and manner of death. Cause of death is what it sounds like. What caused this person to die at this point in time? Manner of death is a way in which we categorize deaths for purposes of reporting on the death certificate. And in Georgia, as a medical examiner, we're limited to 5 manners of death: natural, accident, suicide, homicide, and undetermined. Okay, so 2004, I left Fulton County and went to work for Dr. Gerald T. Gowitt, G-O-W-I-T-T, who's the chief medical examiner in DeKalb County. And not only did we handle medical examiner cases for DeKalb County, but we also handled cases for Hall, Henry, Rockdale, and White counties. Toward the end of 2005, I had the opportunity to form my own company and put in a bid for the medical examiner contract here in Gwinnett County. So the medical examiner position here in Gwinnett County is not a county department, it is a contracted position. I was awarded that contract in February of 2006, and I have maintained that position since then. I am licensed to practice medicine in the state of Georgia and have been since 1992. I'm triple board certified by the American Board of Pathology in all 3 areas of pathology in which I have trained and studied: anatomic, clinical, and forensic pathology. I have personally done between 6,200 and 6,300 autopsies. I have supervised individuals in training in over 700 additional autopsies. And I have testified in the superior courts of Georgia and been declared an expert witness over 395 times.
All right, this time I tender Dr. Terry is an expert in the field of forensic pathology.
All right, she will be so tender.
Dr. Terry, did you conduct an autopsy in the medical examiner's case number 21G1279?
Yes, I did.
Well, first of all, where did that number come from?
Okay. 21, it was a death that occurred in the year 2021. G stands for Gwinnett. And then the 1279, this was the 1,279th death that was reported to our office in that year.
And is a number assigned to every case that comes into the medical examiner's office?
Yes, a number is assigned to every death that is reported to our office. Not every reported death comes into our office, but every death that is reported to our office gets assigned a case number.
And does that case number follow every activity, photograph, sample, procedure that is taken in that particular death?
In our office, yes.
What did you do in relationship to case number 21G1279?
Okay, typically, with any death that's reported to our office in which we have accepted jurisdiction and my investigator has decided that the body needs to come in for an examination, there's a discussion that occurs between me and my investigator so that I am briefed on what they know about the case, and if they've gone to the scene, what was observed at the scene. And then when I go to do the examination in the morgue, Typically, the investigator who handled the case or went to the scene assists with the examination so that there can be a free exchange of information as we're doing the examination. So in a case of a gunshot wound, I'll have x-rays taken prior to my examining the body, prior to the disaster bag containing the body even being opened, because that's something that my technicians can do without the body being exposed and the disaster bag being open. So that's something that can be done prior to my arrival into the morgue. And so I can know whether or not I have any evidence in the body that I need to recover. Also, in reviewing the circumstances, I'll determine what sort of trace evidence, if any, I need to direct my attention to collecting prior to any undressing or cleaning of the body. So that's very important that I know about the circumstances under which a death has occurred or the body has been found. Then I'll do an external examination of the body. And in doing this external or outside examination of the body, I'm describing any articles of clothing that are on the body, any personal effects, any kind of medical intervention that occurred. And then, much like any family physician would examine any one of you, I'll take a measured height or body length, a recorded weight from the scale in the morgue. I'll say whether or not the person appears consistent with the age that they're purported to be. Now, in the case in question, the individual came into our office as an unidentified person. So, of course, there's going to be attention directed to identifying marks, scars, tattoos, because we want to get this person identified. Again, depending upon the circumstances, there may be some collection of trace type evidence. In this case in question, because of the circumstances, I collected various swabs and smears from body surfaces and orifices because I had a young female dead in a park. And so one of the things I've got to be concerned about, was there any kind of sexual contact that occurred? So these are things, if you don't think about them in the beginning, you're going to lose it because you're going to start altering the body by undressing and cleaning the body. So these are my first steps. And then after the external examination, attention was then directed to doing an internal examination. So opening the body and examining the organs as they're positioned in the body. At that point in time, we will collect specimens for routine drug testing, at least, depending upon the nature of the case, we may do more expanded drug testing, but we'll at least collect that. We will collect specimens for potential DNA analysis, and then I'll have the organs removed from the body. And in doing a full autopsy, we'll look at the organs of the chest, abdomen, pelvis, as well as the brain. I'll examine the organs, weigh them, dissect them, and take a small piece of each major tissue and place in a container of formaldehyde solution in case I have to look at it under the microscope. In some cases, I don't need to process the tissue to look at under the microscope. That's something that is taken in the course of doing a full autopsy. And these are the steps that were taken in the course of this examination. And also in the course of this examination, I recovered some evidence from the body, specifically bullet fragments from the head.
I'm going to show you what's marked as State's Exhibits 59 through 60.
Okay, are we skipping 58 on purpose? Do not have a 58.
I'm sorry, there's actually 58 through 60. I'm not skipping it, I'm just not reading it.
Okay.
Okay, yes.
Are State's Exhibits 58 through 60 true and accurate depictions of that which they're photographs of?
Yes, they are.
Has anything been added to, taken away from them?
No.
Your Honor, the state would tender State's Exhibits 58 through 60.
No objection. All right, 58 through 60 are admitted without objection. And
we'll start with a description of, since you mentioned them, States 58 and 59.
Okay.
Yes.
Oh, sorry.
Publishing States Exhibit 58. What is, describe States Exhibit 58 to the jury, please.
Okay, State's Exhibit 58 is the jacket fragment of a bullet that I recovered from the head of the deceased. And so this jacket is the outer covering of the bullet, and it's what I would call yellow metal. So it's kind of a golden look to it, and it was on the outer part of the bullet, and it's been broken off. And on the outside of it, you have what's referred to as rifling marks. So when the bullet came out of the gun, it imparted these striations on the outside of the jacket. And so that's what we're looking at in this photograph. And in addition, this photograph depicts a scale for reference, so you can see roughly what size this jacket fragment is. And there's an adhesive label that has the case number, the deceased name, the date I began the autopsy, because I did the external examination on one day to try to get identifying information out to the law enforcement and then did the internal examination on the next day. And then it's got my signature on there as well as a description. It's a yellow metal jacket from the left side of the head. And so I recovered it from inside the head.
And State's Exhibit 59.
Okay. State's Exhibit 59 is the lead core part of the bullet. So this is the center part of the bullet. The core in the jacket had separated. And in this photograph, you see the lead core. I've marked the base of the lead core with a capital T that you can see in this photograph, T for Terry. And you also have the identification tag associated with it, case number, date of commencement of the autopsy, the deceased name, and my signature, as well as the site of where I recovered this lead core. And it's not depicted, but there was also an additional small fragment of yellow metal jacket that I recovered from inside the head. But these are the two main fragments of the bullet that were recovered from the left side of the head in doing the internal examination.
Now, these physical samples you collected, but you also mentioned other samples that would include swabs, blood. What is done with the biological samples that you collect from that you collected from the site?
Okay, if we're talking about the swabs and smears, those specimens were collected and packaged and turned over to the investigating agency for potential testing down the line, because typically the State Crime Laboratory or the Georgia Bureau of Investigation does not test these specimens unless they have a suspect. So we collected these specimens and turned them over to law enforcement. That's the same sort of thing that was done with her clothing. The other biological specimens that I mentioned, blood that was obtained from the autopsy, urine, vitreous fluid, those specimens were submitted directly to the Georgia Bureau of Investigation for routine drug screening and alcohol testing.
And you mentioned vitreous fluid. What is vitreous fluid?
Vitreous fluid is fluid from inside the eye.
Based on both your external and internal examinations, were you able to form an expert opinion about the cause and manner of death of Miss Tori Lang?
Yes, I was able to make rulings.
What rulings were you able to make in your expert opinion?
In my expert opinion, the cause of death was that Miss Lang died as a result of a gunshot wound to the head. And go, want me to proceed on about manner of death? Yes. And for manner of death, it was my ruling that the manner be undetermined.
And that's, and when you say undetermined, that is from the one of the five categories that you listed: natural, accident, suicide, homicide, and undetermined.
That is correct.
Did you make additional findings about how Miss Lang died based on observations made at the scene, photographs, or other information?
Yes, I have additional information about circumstances surrounding her death based on examination of the body in conjunction with speaking with my investigator and reviewing photographs from the scene.
Look at some of the photographs from the scene. But first, I want to go ahead and get this over with. What was the wound path taken by the bullet that killed Tori Lang?
Okay, well, the entrance wound was on the right side of her head, kind of above and in front of the ear, roughly in the temporal area. And the wound path went from her right side towards her left. There was no significant upward or downward or frontward or backward deviation. It basically went straight across. And in doing so, it produced a devastating injury of the base of the brain, disrupting the main blood vessels at the base of the brain, as well as transecting an area of the brain stem known as the pons.
And what does a bullet transecting that particular section of the brainstem do to the human body?
Well, basically, it severs the connection between the cortex of the brain and the rest of the body, so you would not be capable of any voluntary movement, and would result in a pretty sudden death. Because again, your brainstem is responsible for vital functions of the body, and it has now been completely severed.
Would vital functions include heartbeat, breathing, motor control?
Yes.
Yes to all of those things?
Yes.
And you said death would be fairly. I want to use your words.
Sure. And the reason, because again, it's the pons. Could there have been a couple of heartbeats after? Yeah, possibly. So, but death would be fairly instant, not necessarily instantaneous. Might have gotten a couple of heartbeats, but I can tell you there was no breathing in of any blood. So I think death was probably within a matter of seconds.
But after this region of the brainstem is injured in that fashion, essentially there will be no voluntary movement by Tori after receiving that injury.
That is correct. No voluntary movement.
Does State's Exhibit 60 demonstrate this wound path or allow you to show the jury the wound path?
Yes, it does.
Your Honor, before I publish State's Exhibit 60, I will warn that it is on the more gruesome side of things. So if there's anybody in a courtroom that is a little on the sweeter side, I would suggest that they exit at this time.
Other than jurors, obviously, who cannot.
This is thinking that this State's Exhibit 60. Can you describe for the jury what's shown here?
Okay, first of all, let me give you orientation. At this point in the autopsy, the brain has been removed from the skull. As the body is positioned here, the face would be pointed upward, the back of the head pointed downward. May I stand?
Yes.
Make sure you keep your voice up so that you can be heard by the jury in the court.
Okay. This is where the spinal cord is. This is an area at the base of the skull called the foramen magnum. This is not an injury. So it's important to recognize that as an anatomic landmark. Here is the entrance wound into the skull. And again, this is the right side of her head. And the bullet has come across. We see radiating fractures or breaks in the skull that emanate from this hole. And then the bullet fragments and breaks the bone over here on the opposite side of the skull. And as I mentioned earlier, the core and the jacket separated. I recovered them kind of beneath the scalp in this area, but this is where the skull is broken. But so the bullet has crossed from the right side of the head to the left, essentially passing straight across. And these bones here, there, and there, called the petraeus ridge. This is where communicates with where your ears are. We've got fractures across both of these bones here. So when you see photographs in the scene and you see blood coming out of the ears, that's why we've got a fracture of the base of the skull, basilar skull fractures, where blood is going to be leaking through those areas.
Now, did this particular, your examination of the inside of Tori's skull, did that confirm, or was that consistent with findings that you, external, did that confirm your analysis based on what you saw externally?
Yes, that she was shot in the head.
Were you able to determine the distance from which she was shot?
Yes. I was able to give a range of fire.
How so?
Well, one of the things that I do as a forensic pathologist is my expertise is in pattern recognition. And while I'm not a ballistics expert, my expertise is in terminal ballistics, what bullets do to bodies and the evidence that they deposit on the bodies. And so in looking at this entrance gunshot wound on Miss Lang's head, there was gunpowder injury around this wound. When a firearm is discharged, other things come out of the end of the gun other than just the bullet. You can have gases, you can have flame, you can have smoke or soot, and you can have particles of burned and unburned gunpowder coming out. And based on the mass associated with these different elements affects how far this material travels. So a contact wound of the head is going to look different from a distant gunshot wound to the head because you don't have these materials getting deposited on the skin. And there are gradations in this range based upon the access of these different materials to being deposited around the wound. And looking at Miss Lang, the configuration of the wound was round. With a contact wound, because you get gases that build up between the scalp and the skull, you get tearing of the wound typically. We don't have this. This was not a contact wound. Also, you can get a muzzle injury. You can get burning or searing of the wound edges. You can get soot. None of that was present. This is not a contact range wound. If you move a little further away, you can get soot around the wound because you got the smoke or the soot getting deposited on the skin, and you can get gunpowder striking the skin and producing injuries. Well, we have the gunpowder injury, but we don't have the soot. So this is falling in a range of fire that I refer to as a medium range wound. And medium range can also be referred to as intermediate. I tend to use medium because intermediate sounds too much like indeterminate. So by medium range, I mean I've got gunpowder injury without soot. And so it implies certain things about range of fire. And in measuring the diameter of the stippling or the gunpowder injury around this wound, from that, you can estimate a range of fire. The only way to know absolutely what the range of fire is to test fire the weapon and see about replicating that pattern of stippling or gunpowder injury. So in measuring the diameter of the stippling, the estimated range of fire is 10 to 12 inches from the muzzle of the gun to Miss Lang's head.
I'm going to show you what's marked as admitted at State's Exhibit 47. Can you describe what we're seeing in State's Exhibit 47?
Okay, State Exhibit 47, we're looking at a photograph of the scene of Ms. Lang. And in this photograph, there are a couple of things that are important here in how she's positioned at the scene. Something to note is the pattern of the blood as it's coming out of her nose and as it's coming out of the wound and out of her ears. It's going straight down in accordance with gravity. She's in that position at the time she sustained this wound, because as soon as she got this wound, it's going to start bleeding. And so she wasn't upright and fell down. She's lying in this position. Also looking at her braids, I measured the braids at 36 inches long. Her braids are splayed out behind her head. Again, she didn't fall down on top of them. They've been essentially fanned out. Her head's in that position at the time she received this wound. And that's what's important in this photograph. And in this photograph, we do have the blood that's coming from the ears, from the wound, from the nose, but there's stippling there as well. That's that gunpowder injury, but that's harder to appreciate given the bleeding and brain matter that you have associated with this wound in this picture.
Show you what's admitted as State's Exhibit 48. Recognize what's depicted in State's Exhibit 48.
Yes, I do.
Can you tell the jury about it?
Okay, State's Exhibit, said 48, 40.
I'm sorry, this is State's Exhibit 52.
Sorry, 52, I'm sorry. This is a photograph that's taken in the morgue. And as I mentioned earlier, when I start conducting my examination, there's going to be various cleaning of the body. And so in the course of doing this examination, I'm altering the body. One of the things that I'm doing is shaving around the wound so I can see the extent of this gunpowder injury around the wound. So in this photograph, she's been cleaned, undressed, and I've shaved around this wound to look at the extent of the gunpowder injury. And as I mentioned earlier, a contact wound of the head is going to look different. This entrance wound is a typical looking wound. It's round and it has this gunpowder injury around it. And we don't see any soot there. So this is what I characterize as a medium range of fire.
And you said a medium range of fire means 10 to 12 inches.
Well, in this case, based on the diameter, estimated 10 to 12 inches. And what's going to be medium range of fire? If you consult with a ballistics examiner, it's going to vary based upon the type of firearm, age of ammunition, weather conditions. There are a whole host of things that can factor in. As I said, the only way you can actually know with certainty what the range of fire is to get the weapon, same type of ammunition, and test fire it to replicate that pattern. So I'm giving you an estimate based on consultation with a ballistics examiner and given the diameter of the stippling of 10 to 12 inches.
And do you know if the weapon was recovered such that it could be test fired in this case?
It is my understanding that the weapon was not recovered.
Now, you mentioned the blood flow from Tori's eyes and nose being,
Or ears and nose.
Being at least suggestive as to where she was positioned when she was killed.
Or when she sustained the gunshot wound.
When she sustained the gunshot wound.
Right.
I'm going to show you what has been admitted as State's Exhibit 14. Does that demonstrate the blood flow or lack thereof that you described to the jury?
Yes, it does. It does help demonstrate the flow of blood and how it's flowing in accordance with gravity. Again, as I mentioned, we've got blood that's coming out of the ears. We've got blood that's going to be coming out of the wound. We've got blood that's coming out of the nose, and it is flowing in accordance with gravity. Had she been upright, you would expect to see it come down and then go backwards as she fell back. She's in that position at the time she sustains this wound. And in this photograph, too, something else that became evident as you look at a picture over and over again, as you look at the coagulated blood that's next to the right side of her head, there is, and again, if I may stand, coagulated blood here and here, and there's essentially a void pattern in there. So as this blood is coming out, something has been in that area that interrupted the flow of blood there. Something that was there when blood began to flow and has now been moved. What it is, I can't say, but that's what we refer to as a void pattern. Something was there that's not there now. Because again, we don't have a reason to see a clump of blood here because it's going to come out kind of like lava coming out of a volcano, and it's going to flow, but something has interrupted that flow there that's not there now.
Is there any way to tell what that thing may or may not have been?
I mean, I think if you kind of look at it, I can have some suggestions of what it might be. If again, if you look at kind of that configuration, to me, it looks like it might have the appearance of a firearm. But again, something is there that's not there any longer.
Now, based on your determination of the distance from which the shot, approximate distance from which the shot was fired, that would put the muzzle of the gun at the firing of the fatal shot 10 to 12 inches away from the wounded side.
Again, when you talk about looking at the range of fire from the muzzle of the gun to the head, but again, given the injury of her brainstem, she's not going to be able to hold the gun. The gun's going to fall. How the gun lands, I don't know. So if we assume where we have this void, and let me tell you, and this is something I tell students and trainees whenever I teach classes, it's harder to see what's not there than what is there. It's a lot easier to focus on what you're seeing than what's not there. And that's the good thing about physical evidence and having multiple people look at something, because sometimes things become evident if you look at it repeatedly. Now, again, if we were to assume that that is a shape of a firearm that is not there any longer, that would be certainly closer than 10 to 12 inches. But again, given when a firearm discharges, like in this case where the brainstem severed, she's not going to be able to hold on to the gun's going to fall. How is it going to land? I don't know. But I think that's something that merits consideration.
So you couldn't determine where the gun's going, where it could have landed based on the recoil from the gun, how her hand might have moved, where her hand or his hand might, where a hand, let me rephrase this, where the hand that held the gun might have gone, where the recoil of the gun might have taken it, where.
It is. Can you just ask one question, please?
Account for where the gun might have landed in relationship to the recoil that is created by a semi-automatic firearm when it's fired?
No, there are too many variables here.
Can you account for the position of the hand that held the gun when it was fired?
Again, no. Again, for the same sort of reason, there are a lot of variables. And something else to also mention is I know that there has been someone else there at the scene, because the gun's gone and because I got transfer on her thigh, that she would have no way of getting there. So there are variables that confound where the firearm is, how her arm's positioned, that I have no way of being able to explain.
This seems like a silly question, but I have to answer it because we have to ask silly questions at sometimes. When blood comes out of the human body, is it liquid?
Yes.
When is it that blood starts to clot or coagulate?
Okay, well, it depends on the person. Some people are on anticoagulants, and it may take longer for it to clot. Some people may have other factors that cause them to clot more readily, like high platelet counts or coagulation deficiencies and things of that nature. So it's variable. It's going to be dependent upon the person. And also, too, it can be dependent upon the surface on which the blood is accumulating.
It's nicely to my next question. So the surface on which the at first liquid blood is accumulating can determine whether or not or how fast it coagulates.
It can, yes.
Can blood be absorbed into anything?
Anything's kind of broad because there's certain things that would be resistant to blood soaking into the gown I wear in the course of doing an autopsy. But various surfaces blood can get absorbed into.
Can blood be absorbed into the ground?
Yes.
Would the absorption of the ground be determined by exactly what a particular patch of ground consisted of?
Sure, I would guess, or surmise if, say, we had a patch of grass or something there, something that made it, or a clump of leaves or something that made it somewhat different. Okay, that may interfere with how readily the blood soaks into the ground.
And do you recall if any of your investigators did anyone dig up the blood spot?
No.
Were you able to make any other determinations based on the state of Tori's body at the scene?
I mean, that's kind of broad. I'm not sure.
Let me do a different thing. You mentioned blood transfer on Tori's thigh. I am going to show you what's been admitted as State's Exhibit 30. What's depicted in State's Exhibit? I'm sorry, State's Exhibit 50.
Yes, I was just gonna say
I-
that can't be 30, so State's 50, okay.
Okay, okay. State Exhibit 50, what we're looking at, this is a close-up photograph of Tori's right thigh. So let me orient you. Her head and upper torso would be to the right of the screen. The feet would be towards the left. And so, again, if I may stand, that's sort of the inner thigh area. You see the left inner thigh kind of at the bottom of the screen. So, and in this photograph, we're seeing some blood that has been transferred to this area. This is in looking at photographs from the scene, and I don't believe not with me on the stand, have we seen a photograph showing her body where you see this transfer on her thigh. But that is something, in looking at photographs and in discussing with my investigators at the time I began the examination, this blood was out of place in the context of her injury and the blood flow of her head. There was no way to explain how she could have gotten this blood on her thigh. It has been transferred there by something else. So in looking at this, there's some splotches of blood that are up higher towards the line of her shorts. And then there's some linear areas, or kind of linear, with drops of blood kind of running down a little bit that are kind of more towards the inner thigh. And again, this is blood that was later determined to be Tori's blood, because when you see blood like this that's out of context, you may worry about someone else having injured themselves and depositing blood on an individual. So in the course of doing this examination, I took swabs of that blood because it's out of place. It was determined to be Tori's blood, but it's been transferred there. She was not able to, after receiving this injury, get blood on her thigh.
I'll show you on that same subject what's been previously admitted as State's Exhibit 12. I have zoomed in a little to illustrate the blood that was found on Tori's thigh.
Okay. And again, mainly the focus was on that right thigh. That was what was more evident at the time when I was examining her in the morgue. But again, this blood is out of place, and you can actually see that there is some that's on the inside of her left thigh as well. And again, she was not able to transfer this blood in this area. So something or someone has touched her thighs in that area and deposited the blood there. And it's her blood.
But after sustaining the injury that she did to her head, there was no more motor function.
Correct. As I said, she would not have been able to deposit the blood there. It was transferred there.
I'll show you what's previously been admitted as State's Exhibit 46. Part of the findings that you made were that Tori was in that position when she sustained the gunshot wound.
Question?
I was waiting for you to finish with the one.
Oh, sorry. Yes.
How does this picture illustrate or not illustrate that?
Okay. Yes. I mean, before we've talked just about blood putting her in that position. Also, as we look at her, we see particulate dirt that's on the back of her thighs, was on the back of her clothing. She sat in that position. She was not dragged into that position because these are particles of dirt that are stuck on her. Again, if she'd been dragged, expect to see it more smeared, and it's particles there. And again, nothing smeared on her back. And again, talking about the flow of the blood, the fact that, we've got 36-inch long braids that are fanned out. She has placed herself in that position. She's not been dragged or manipulated into that position.
Show you what's been admitted as State's Exhibit 54. Try anyway. Does State's Exhibit 54 contribute to your finding that Tori was in the position in which she was found when she sustained a gunshot wound.
Yes, I think that helps. Again, we've got particulate blood. I don't know if there's any better picture of the shirt at the scene, because in this photograph, she has been manipulated at the scene, tipped up, and then taken to the morgue where she's been undressed. So the shirt is more saturated with blood than it would have been at the scene. But again, the dirt looks relatively particulate and not scraped or smeared like she's been dragged.
I'm going to show you what's been admitted as State's Exhibit 57. Is that the same shirt?
Yes, it is.
And does it contribute to your finding that she was in that place when she sustained a gunshot wound?
Again, for the same thing I said in the previous photograph, I mean, it's the same sort of thing. We've got particulate dirt, and this is the shirt after it's been removed in the morgue and after it's dried. So, there's some alteration there of the blood where the blood's all streaked because, again, she's been rolled, she's been transported from the scene to the morgue, and the shirt's been removed. So looking at the blood on this shirt's kind of misleading, but looking at that particulate dirt, again, it's not smeared or ground in. She's not been dragged into that position. I think it supports that she lay down at that site.
Again, your finding as to the manner of death was undetermined.
That is correct.
Were you able to exclude homicide as a manner of death?
No.
Were you able to exclude suicide as a manner of death?
No.
Were you able to exclude accident as a manner of death?
Yes.
Were you able to exclude natural as a manner of death?
Yes.
I don't have any other questions.
Let me have counsel for both sides approach, please. All right, I expect this witness to be rather lengthy, and so I'm not going to keep you all that late tonight. We are going to conclude for the evening. Let me ask Dr. Tori to step off the witness stand for a moment. All right, I'm going to remind everybody of your precautionary instructions during the overnight recess. The more we get into the trial and further along, those instructions become more and more important. So please adhere to those instructions. Leave your notepads and your pens in the chair. Take all of your personal belongings, and we will resume at 9 o'clock tomorrow. 9 o'clock, report to jury assembly.
And I think we have something to say after the jury exits, but I think we've only got like a couple minutes to go.
All right, anything we need to take up from the state before we recess for the evening?
Yeah, Your Honor.
From the defense? All right, we will resume at 9 o'clock tomorrow. Mr. Ford is back with the deputies.
Okay, well, that concludes that.
I'll ask the
So,
state to keep all of the exhibits overnight and return them in the morning.
okay, so that was really